everyone's here, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Supervisor Powers.
Good and gracious Creator, we commend to your continual care the homes in which your people dwell. Put far from them every root of bitterness, the desire of vainglory, and the pride of life. Fill them with faith, virtue, knowledge, temperance, and patience. Turn the hearts of the parents to the children, and the hearts of the children to the parents, and so enkindle fervent charity among us all, that we may evermore be kindly affectioned one to another. Amen.
Do I have a motion to accept this evening's agenda? Motion made and seconded for the adoption of this evening's agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Carried. At this time, we'll allow persons from the audience to go ahead and express their opinions on any resolution or ordinance that appears on the agenda, as well as any matter to have to do with Winnebago County. If there's anyone, just please stand and go to a mic, state your name and address. Get this off, Cassie. Just gotta come off. Julie's not sick. She's gone to her first official meeting. So everybody's learning, so you'll have to bear with us. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak? Anyone wish public? Not seeing any. Is there anyone? Deal, you have anyone on there? Not seeing anyone on Zoom either. We'll continue right on and close that portion of tonight's meeting. Next part is reports from committees, commissions, and boards. Anyone? Supervisor Bender.
I'd just like to say 17 years ago today, Mark Newmeyer and Dan Melhorn got hit on 41 and lost their lives. When you go to bed tonight, say a little prayer for them. It's how dangerous the job is out there, and sometimes we don't realize that we need to slow down.
Vice Chairman Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just like to announce we will be having our legislative committee on March 27th at 8:30 in the morning at the Calkins Center. Thank you.
Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just a reminder that Winnebago County scholarships for high school seniors are due and must be postmarked no later than March 31st and sent to the Winnebago County Clerk's Office at Post Office Box 2806 in Oshkosh, 54903. And winners will be determined no later than May 5th. And we need to have a 500 to 800 word essay addressing the question, if I were to run for any Winnebago County office, which position would I run for and why? And it is a $1,000 scholarship. Thank you.
You. Not seeing any other lights on. We'll continue right on. Whoops, we got one more. Supervisor Haran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was fortunate enough to be able to go over to Madison last week on Tuesday and Wednesday. I have put my notice or my written description of it, I've given it to clerk's office. It will go out, and so I thank Supervisor Defferting for doing that so that I'm not wasting time. But I did want to say one of the things that I came away with was it is very important for us to communicate, not just to each other and not just to employees of the county, but also to our constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, now that part's closed. Chairman's report. I'm going to go around and start saying who's going to be absent if you can't tell already. Some might be on Zoom. Some would be coming in Zoom a little bit later. Supervisor Gustafson, Supervisor Albrecht will be excuse Supervisor Robinson, Supervisor Gabbert, Supervisor Wise, Supervisor Buck. She's here. I think that's all. Oh, and Supervisor Depperding, I had a call, but I got it too late or whatever, so I don't know if he's running late or if he was going to be excused, but he did call me for whatever reason. So if you're not here, speak up. All right. We did receive a letter. I think one of the girls is going to read the letter that I received. Cassie, you want to read that? Yep. If I can find you, I have to find you underneath Ertmer. There you go.
We received correspondence dated February 25th, 2023. The Honorable Chairman Thomas Egan, Winnebago County Board of Supervisors, County Administration Building, 112 Otter Avenue, Oshkosh, Wisconsin, 54903. Dear Chairman Egan, as you may be aware, the Milwaukee Brewers are saying they may leave Milwaukee in a few years, about 2030. This would be a tragedy. I hope you can encourage your residents of Winnebago County to attend as many Brewer games as they can to keep up interest and attendance up. I imagine that many businesses in your county entertain customers. Going to a Brewer game is a good way to do that. Thank you. Sincerely, Mike Rollins.
Thank you. The agenda had already been printed and gone out, so I couldn't get this done this time. So I'm just going to tell you who I plan on putting on these two task force that was approved last time. I'm going to mention the names, and then afterwards, if you cannot serve on one of these task force that I mentioned your name on, please let me know. And then someone from this task force is going to have to take the initiative to get together with the other ones, get where they want to meet and what times and places. So the task force on committees is Supervisor Defferding, Hansen, Flom, Eisen, and Gabbert. Task force on per diems is Ellenberger, Harrison, Sestera, Powers, Bender, Wise, and Schellinger. So then we'll be appointed at our next meeting. So if you heard your name on there and you don't feel as though you're going to be able to serve or whatever, let me know and we'll have to replace it with someone else. There's a lot of things we got to cover tonight, so I'm not going to say much more. So I'm going to go right into agenda items. First thing will be the wage study compensation update with Victoria McGrath from McGrath Human Resource Group, Mark Harbeck, Director of Human Resources, and John Damel, County Executive. If you want to come up, you two, and the other one, I believe there's a pamphlet, am I correct?
They would have received it in their packet, yes.
Should be a pamphlet on their desk.
No, that's the one that got in with their packet.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
I didn't bring that in there.
Yep, I put it on, oh, yeah, I got it on public, so.
Thank you, Chairman Egan. Dr. McGrath is going to be giving a short presentation update similar to the one that she briefed the P&F committee on last week. And then once she finishes her presentation, I'm going to run through a quick PowerPoint presentation as well. And then certainly we're willing to entertain any questions or discussion that the board has.
Can you just hold on, Mark? Yes, Supervisor Eisen. Yes? Yes, sir.
I would like to move to suspend Rule 10.2 that says no member shall speak more than twice on the same question. Inasmuch, and this would apply to the, in particular, to the pay structure presentation, because I think there should be a lot of questions that'll come up along the way, and the only way to account for that is to speak. And if you've got 2 opportunities to speak, that's probably not enough. So I'd be asking someone to second that so that we can take a vote on suspending Rule 10.2.
Motion made and seconded. Now we have to have two-thirds? So now we have to have two-thirds vote on that in order for it to pass. Pardon? Is that debatable or not? It is not debatable. You're not being acknowledged yet, so. It's not debatable? No. Okay. Supervisor Hanson, you were next. Is it debatable? It can't be. So if that's something to debate, we can't debate it.
Is it possible to maybe offer an amendment to the suspension? Or do we need to vote first?
The suspension is a non-ranking motion, so it is possible to make an amendment to it.
I get where Supervisor Eisen is coming from and understand that concern. Would he be amenable to maybe even more than 2 times speaking, but still limited to the 2 minutes each time, and the chairman can gavel down if anything is going awry? Is that a possible amendment?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I'm okay with more than 2 questions, but limiting to
I'm
2
just
minutes
looking.
each,
Well,
so that
there
it is,
wanted to
There is
see.
nothing in Rule 10.2
Two.
that says 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So that 2 minutes would certainly apply without any adjustment.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay, so we need two-thirds votes in order for this to pass. I see no one else with any questions, so we'll do by machine so everyone sees what it is.
I don't know how to do that part.
If you're in favor of it, vote A. If you're not, vote nay.
And I don't know how to do that part. She didn't show me how to enter anything because we weren't supposed to vote on anything. Can you do
It's gonna
voice?
take a little while because like, we weren't gonna vote on anything tonight. That's why it's gonna be,
What? Could it be a verbal? Could we do a,
we can do verbal. We can try and pass a verbal one.
because I've got a list of people where I can do individual if you would.
Let's just try verbals. Those that are in favor of it signify by saying aye. Aye. Those that are against it say nay. Nay. The nays have it. Okay, we'll continue on then. Where? Have to go back to the screen. Get the doctor on there.
She's gonna share the screen on her side.
Dr. McGrath, you're muted.
Okay, let's try this again. I apologize. Wasn't sure if I was on or not, so I apologize for the little bit of delay. So anyways, for those that don't remember, I'm Dr. Victoria McGrath, CEO of McGrath Human Resources Group. I'm just going to do a very, very short presentation just to kind of let you know where we left off. Obviously, I saw you early in January. We talked about the process and what we were doing. And then here's the
You're cut out, Dr. McGrath.
Dr. McGrath, you're muted.
I apologize. I'm not sure what's going on. I've been on Zoom all day, so I'm not sure why we have a problem today. But anyways, what we did is we had two basic issues that we needed to deal with. One is that was your 2023 schedule competitive to the external market? Hopefully you can hear me now. And the second thing is that because of how the implementation of the schedule has been over the last couple of years, we needed to be concerned about longer tenured employees and where they are within the salary range. Because you have nice salary ranges, but you can't use them because a lot of your longer tenured employees are in now the lower part of the range. And based upon their years of experience, they should be further within that salary range. So those were the two major issues that we wanted to deal with this update to the compensation program. So basically what we did is we looked at your compensation program where we're going to base it off an average market rate. So basically all of the data that we looked at, we made sure that we didn't skew any of the data that was too high or too low, and we built it about the average market. We changed some percentages between ranges because sometimes when you do that, you take care of a number of the issues of positions that may no longer be within that salary range. So we were able to do that. We also adjusted the range. The formulas within the range had kind of gotten lost, and so that's all we did was reinstate those formulas so that when you update that salary range, the entire range increases it appropriately. And then we moved some positions to different pay grades because based upon the skills, responsibilities of those positions, comparing that to the average market rate, the adjustments that we made were not sufficient enough for those positions to remain competitive within the market. And so therefore some positions were moved to different pay grades. You had somehow along the way, there are a couple pay grades came in that were an A and a B, and so we eliminated those kind of squeezed in pay ranges, and as a result of that, we changed the numbering because it would be a little bit confusing if I was a 24 and now I'm a 22, and even though nothing really happened, sometimes people think that they got demoted or they changed, so we just changed the numbering to be more consistent. And then we tried to strike a balance between being competitive minimums and making sure that employees were moving through that salary range. And so working with human resources, we came up with a process to look at current employees and move them within that range. And basically we said, okay, here's your range. Between the minimum and range A is a 45% range. It starts at 45 and goes up. The control point is your average market rate. That's where you should be within 3 to 5 years if you're fully capable and competent of doing the job. Range C was 60% of the market or 10% over, and then range D, it ends at 74%. And so using a formula of looking at, first of all, if you were not at the minimum, you went to the minimum of the salary range. And then if you were already in the salary range, we look at your years of position, where those years should be within those different quadrants, and then gave an additional increase to get the employee within that quadrant. If you were already there because you had been paid appropriately throughout the years, then obviously no additional increase was given. And so I want to reiterate that going forward, we need to look at two different types of increases. Again, I use January and July. The organization can do what they want to, but we need to, number one, make sure the salary schedule remains healthy. And we have to increase that salary range on an annual basis so that we can continue to remain competitive, or you don't turn around and start spending a lot of money because those salary ranges have fallen out of competitiveness. And then in July, when a person has completed a positive evaluation, they get their merit increase through into the range. The example here looks at steps, and what I want you to kind of think of is kind of like, this is kind of like a step system. That merit pool is what the step is that moves you through that. And I know I've had some conversations with human resources because the concerns have been brought up by some of you about the merit pool and about shares and things of that nature. And I know Mark is working on making that possibly a little bit more understandable and a little bit more easier to use so that we can make sure that we have those 2 salary increases. So I know he's going to be working on that. So basically, we need to make sure we have the salary schedule, we have the increase, and then every 3 to 5 years, it's not a bad idea to, go out and take a look in the market and see if you're okay. We've also added a market adjustment. So we developed those quartiles and we said where you should be with acceptable performance. And so we might be recommending that occasionally employees get a market adjustment to make sure that those 2 increases have got them within that portion of the salary range where they should be. And obviously, again, if they're not there because of poor performance, well, that's obviously a totally different story. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I believe that Mark has a presentation that they've been giving to employees, and I will go back on mute, which I seem to be going on to, and answer questions at the end.
We have a question right now, Mark, if you don't mind. Supervisor Bender.
If you could, maybe while Mark's doing his presentation, you can maybe figure out an answer for me, how you adjusted the county exec, he was at a 21 at a $51,000 pay grade, and you adjusted him up to a 71, which is a $95,000 pay grade. It's about an 80-some% increase, and I guess I would like to know what justified that when a hospitality aide stayed at $15.31, and we can't get people in Parkview because we don't have enough staff. I just can't justify a $50,000 raise for one person, and we keep the lowest paid person in the county at the same wage. Take your time and try to figure out a good answer for me when Mark's done, please.
Mark?
All right, thank you. So as we told the Personnel and Finance Committee last week, one of our deliverables in this is really communication with employees. And we've got about, I think right now, 10 meetings scheduled this week with employees to talk about the compensation schedule, what the plan is, what we've done so far, and where we see ourselves moving forward. And I don't want to cover ground that Dr. McGrath has already covered, but this is going to be the PowerPoint presentation that we're presenting to employees, and I'm going to hit the highlights that wouldn't have been covered in her presentation. So again, very briefly, we last did this in 2016, and we're doing it again now due to changes in the labor market. There's 2 major issues that you've heard Dr. McGrath talk about. The first is in-range compression, and if you take nothing else away from this slide, you've heard her talk about the control point, which is the top of range B. She's talked how that's the average market rate and how employees should have a way to move to that rate within 3 to 5 years. And right now that's not happening. The original compensation plan in 2016 that was developed, we did adjust the minimum raises, the minimums for the different pay grades, but it took us 3 years to accomplish that. We also had planned on moving employees and, in essence, reslotting them at that time, but that also didn't happen. So right now, where we're at, we have about 381 employees that have 6 years or more experience, and they're below the control point. And again, that's where we'd expect employees to be within 3 to 5 years. That's creating that in-range compression. It's making it difficult to hire because we don't have access to the full hiring range unless we start new people higher than existing employees. The second major issue that she just touched on was no cost of living adjustment to employees. Now, back in 2016, after the study, there were 2 recommendations. One was that we do a cost of living adjustment just like we do every year to the schedule. I was here in November where we updated the 2023 comp schedule. And we did an across-the-board adjustment to those pay ranges. However, employees don't get that adjustment. They only get a merit raise. So originally, Dr. McGrath had recommended that we do a cost of living adjustment that we apply to the schedule, and then we also apply that same cost of living adjustment to employee pay, and then they get a second raise that's based on merit. Back in 2016, all that was approved was a merit raise. Dr. McGrath already covered this slide, her salary schedule adjustments. So the comp ratio, what is it? It's defined so that the average market rate, which is the control point, has a compensation ratio of 50%. I'm going to talk about this comp ratio later on in some slides, but our pay ranges extend about 10% below the average market rate, comp ratio of 40%, to about 24% above the market rate, a comp ratio of 74%. This is not a change from what we had in 2016. However, it's important to have an understanding of it as we look at our proposal. Dr. McGrath already covered this, so I'm going to skip the general information. It just explains where the comp ratios are in our current schedule. So what's gone to PNF and now to the board? We've really focused on two things at this point in the compensation plan. We're focusing on recruitment and adjusting those minimums to positions, as well as adjusting employee pay based on length of service in their position. And we're trying to balance those two tensions, recruitment and retention. If we raise the minimums up for the different positions too much, we don't end up with enough money to reslot employees throughout their range. If we spend too much being too aggressive reslotting employees, we're not lifting the different pay rates high enough to be as competitive as what we need to be in the market. So we're trying to balance those two things while at the same time staying within the $2 million that had been allocated for this process. Now, other things are coming. The pay study, I have been referring it to, it's kind of like how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. The first bite of this process is looking at our compensation schedule and any adjustments to employee pay. We will need to come back and look at how we do our merit pay policy. Right now, if you end up approving this in March, it won't do anything to address that cost of living adjustment. That's one of the next pieces. Also, Dr. McGrath has some recommendations regarding benefits, paid time off, different pay rules, some HR rules. There's a wide variety of recommendations that she's got in her report. However, we're bringing those at a later time. We thought it's important, number one, from a recruitment standpoint, to adjust the schedule now so it can help us in that recruitment effort. Also, for our employees, both for retention as well as morale, we want to adjust them appropriately within their pay range. And we're calling that adjustment reslotting employees. Now, a couple things to note. This proposal would adjust those minimums right away. We'd move the new minimums, they'd be there, we'd do an adjustment. Back in 2016, it took us 3 consecutive years where employees had an adjustment in 3 consecutive years to get to that new minimum. All the while, employees who were above the minimum, they were still getting a merit raise, but that bottom was creeping closer. So that's also what impacted in-range compression. So what's our reslotting formula? We took a look, we broke up the ranges into the comp ratio that Dr. McGrath had originally developed. Again, we've got 40% at the very bottom, that's starting pay. The control point where an employee should reach in 3 to 5 years is 50%. And then we extend all the way to top of D. And the question was, how can we come up with a consistent framework to apply to all employees so that really it becomes a math issue as far as we're not looking at a certain position or a certain employee. We're looking based on objective criteria and trying to apply that across the board. So we came up with different years in position, kind of a floor of where someone should be. So for instance, if an employee's been here 5 years in their position, well, again, based on Dr. McGrath's recommendation, 3 to 5 years, they should be at the control point. So we would adjust employees up to the control point, 50%, if they've been here 5 years, and they're below that. There is nothing, these years are specific to how we've done the reslotting. And I guess what I mean by that is this isn't meant to say that an employee shouldn't get to the top of range C until 13 years. What it's saying is right now our system, we have so much in-range compression and issues right now to fix. We've kind of come up with a minimum. You know, if an employee's been here 13 years in their position, well, we think comp ratio is 60%, top of C. That's a minimum rate they should be at, so that's what we'd adjust them to. Moving forward, as part of that next bite of the elephant, it's important that we come up with a system where employees can have a meaningful movement throughout the pay range and expect to move up in 3 to 5 years. I'm going to share an example later. You'll see how long it's potentially taken some employees to get up to that control point. So under this proposal, will everyone receive a raise? The short answer is no. About a third of employees won't receive any type of pay adjustment. And as Dr. McGrath said, that was anticipated due to a variety of factors, changing some of the pay grades, the differences between pay grades. Those that won't receive an adjustment would be new hired employees who already started above the new minimum. Right now, again, when we adjusted the compensation schedule for January, we may have hired someone in November of last year. They may have started at the minimum at that time. Well, then in January, we've changed those minimums. When an employee starts that late in the year, they haven't been here long enough to qualify for a merit raise. So they don't get a merit raise, but yet they've now fallen below the new minimum. In cases like that, we always adjust them up to the new minimum. So this is consistent with that practice. Secondly, if we have recently promoted or transferred employees into a position, they may not get an adjustment. It depends where they fall. Because again, we're not basing this off of your length of time working for Winnebago County. We're basing it off the time in the position that you've been working. And then anyone else who falls within that formula, if they're paid at that minimum level, wouldn't receive an adjustment because they're already being paid in accordance with where the market is based on their years of service. So I've got a few quick examples to share with you that hopefully will illustrate this point a little bit. So if we had an employee who is in their position 1 year and they're currently making $16.45 an hour, and we adjust the new minimum up to $16.87, the first question we ask is, are they making the new minimum or above? And the answer is no. So we're going to adjust that person up to the new minimum. Now they've only been here 1 year, and our first threshold for making an adjustment would be 3 years. So there's no further adjustment to make in this case. A second example would be an employee that's been in their position 7 years, and they're making $17.82 an hour. So again, the first question, are they making the minimum or above? And of course they are, so there's no adjustment related to the minimum. But when we take a look at that formula, 7 years tells us that they should be at a comp ratio of 52.5%. So in this case, that employee is below that comp ratio, so we're going to adjust them up to that. Their pay would get adjusted up to the 1907. It's probably hard to see in the back, but again, the 52.5%, it's at the very bottom, correlates with the 7 years of service. And then a third example, we have an employee who's here 13 years. They're making $21.83. The employee, of course, is already paid over the new minimum. There's no adjustment. And we take a look on our formula. 13 years in the position should place the employee at least at a comp ratio of 60%, which is the top of range C. So in this example, they should be at or above $20.70. In this case, the employee is already paid over that comp ratio, so there'd be no further adjustment. There wouldn't be any additional raise. Now, at the same time, we're not looking to take any money away from employees. We're not taking anything away, moving them down to that, but we're just saying they're already at market based on their years of experience. Now, some of the questions that we may get is, it would be nice if we could give everyone something, give everyone a raise. And I understand that. This person, though, in this situation, they're already at market. If we were to allocate dollars to this employee, I can't take money from the first example because that employee has to go to the minimum. I've got to spend money to move that employee to the new minimum. So the only other place I could take money from would be that, in this example, the 7-year employee that's below market. What we're trying to really focus on is moving and reslotting employees so that their pay is in line with market and their years of service. And so for those employees who are already at that point, we're not looking to make a further adjustment. Now, I've got a couple real-life examples that I want to share. And for Steve and Morris, I've looked at this several times. There's a few tweaks to the numbers, so this is an updated slide. So right now we have an employee that's been in their position for 30 years. In the current schedule, they're only at a comp ratio of 65%. Now, for someone who's been here 30 years, we're only making adjustments 23 years and above all fall to a comp ratio of 70%. So this employee would have an adjustment moving them up to that comp ratio of 70% in their pay scale. Now, we currently have another employee who's been here 19 years that's currently at a comp ratio of 53%. Now, again, Dr. McGrath was talking about, you'll see 50% is that control point. That's what an employee should reach in 3 to 5 years. 53% is just above what we would adjust a 7-year employee to. This person's been here 19 years. This, I think, is a really good example of some of the challenges that we're facing with our workforce, where we have some long tenured employees who have been doing their job a long time and they haven't been able to move throughout their pay range. And there's a lot of reasons for this. Someone who's been with the county this long was here back in, I don't know the specific years, but 2005, 6, 7, 8. We had pay freezes where employees didn't get raises unless they were under a collective bargaining agreement. We had the wage compression that I talked about in 2016, where we increased employee minimum, but we didn't reslot anyone. So in essence, that minimum started catching up. We had that in-range compression. So there's a variety of issues, and it's, I think, important to have some idea how this happened, but right now, this focus is on how do we address this? How do we fix this piece of it so that moving forward we can bring back a plan on pay raises so that we don't continue to create in-range compression. So how did we determine what time and position looks like? Human Resources has individually reviewed over 900 employee records, taking a look at how long employees have been in their current position. Now, we're using the time and position, first of all, not time overall, again, with the county, but time and position, because that's what we're tying their pay to, is the market rate for the position that they're in. But we're also not tying it to a specific team. And what I mean by that is this example, we could have someone who's an Administrative Associate 3 in Human Services, and they may be working on a child welfare team. They may then take a different Administrative Associate 3 position on a different team within Human Services. They've been with the county for 5 years. It's all been as an Administrative Associate 3. We're looking at as 5 years of service as an Administrative Associate 3. On the other hand, if we had, say, that same employee, instead of all 5 years in that same position, maybe they started with us and worked 2 years as an Administrative Associate 1. And then 3 years ago, they took a promotion to an Administrative Associate 3. So they've been with the county for 5 years total, but we're going to base any pay adjustment based on the length of service in their current position. And this same philosophy and interpretation would apply to all positions. We've got, for instance, we'll hire someone as a social work specialist. They may start on our initial assessment team. Then they transfer, they're still a social work specialist, but now they work with the ongoing team, or they work with youth justice, or they work with family placement. But the whole time they've been a social work specialist. So we're counting all of that time towards any type of adjustment. And Human Resources continues to review and update employee records. Basically, until we have something that's approved that we can actually take action on, we're updating our information with new hires, employees that leave the county, employees that transfer or promote, so that when we have something that we can take action on, we can get that implemented. So this proposal provides a consistent, standardized set of rules to follow to determine which individuals qualify for an adjustment and what that adjustment looks like. The exec is probably sick of hearing me say this, but I keep telling employees that, one of the things that I really stressed is I think we need to do this where it's math. We have this objective set. We can take a look at dates of hire, dates in position. We can take a look at what pay range they're in, and we can apply that consistently over our workforce. That way we're not looking at particular departments, particular individuals, particular positions, and we can apply it evenly and objectively. So when will employees know what their raise is? Well, the short answer is, of course, after any action by this board, if the board ends up approving this proposal. So our specific timeline then would be, if this passes, we're going to be reviewing this information again with department heads. We're going to be re-looking at employee data. It's really important for me that as much as possible, we provide accurate information the first time out. There's always going to be a wrinkle or two that someone didn't anticipate or that gets overlooked, but we really want to make sure, especially when we're talking about employee pay, that we can get the right information out the first time. And then we're looking at having these raises go into effect the first pay period after board approval. And part of that is that my team, everything has to be entered manually into the system. All employee raises, all new rates, because again, we're not applying this flat percentage increase. This is a very individualized adjustment. So that's all manual. All the new pay grades are manual adjustments. It's a lot of work on our end for our system. And so that's part of the reason why we're going to go with the start of the next pay period, just so we can facilitate all those changes. So this is the information that we started to present to employees, trying to help them to understand where we've been, why we're where we're at right now, what we're looking to do moving forward, and also to remind them this really is the first step. We have other things. We've got the benefits, we've got the time off, we've got the merit pay policy. There's a lot of other things that we're going to end up coming back to finish off the comp study as a whole, but this really is the first step. So with that, I'm sure there's going to be questions. So the executive, Dr. McGrath, and I are certainly available. One thing I'd like to point out too, when I talked about, I didn't mention this, when we talked about a third of employees not receiving a pay adjustment under this, one of the things that we're reminding employees of is we've been pretty proactive in the last couple of years of doing some adjustments. So for instance, in June of 2021, for Parkview, we've had challenges out at Parkview with hiring and recruitment. We did pay adjustments and increases, moving the CNAs up 2 pay grades. RNs and LPNs, we did pay adjustments based on length of service, just like we're proposing to do now. We did that back in 2021, but we only did it for a small set of employees at Parkview. Then in December 2021, there were special pay increases done for select positions at the sheriff's office. And then in May of last year, the Personnel and Finance Committee, as part of the reclassification process, we actually moved up hospitality aides 2 pay grades. I mean, right now in this new schedule you're seeing, they are in our lowest pay grade. In May of last year, they were 2 grades below that. So we moved them up 2 pay grades last year, actually eliminated the 2 pay grades below where they currently are just because it's not up to market. And then there's other positions that we've moved. So some of the employees that already had an adjustment are at market. But all employees, even if they fell into one of the groups I just spoke about, we're still going to apply the length of service and look at every single employee to see if an adjustment is warranted, if they meet the criteria under the plan that we've set up.
County Executive Damo, did you say something? Otherwise, I have a lot of questions, so whichever you would like to do.
Sure. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for letting us bring this tonight, and we look forward to the questions. And I did want to address a couple of things that Mark hit up at the end that we were talking about today. A lot of these adjustments we already went to. When I first got here, our seasonals were only at $12 an hour, and our hospitality aids were lower. One of the first steps we actually took to make things right was get ourselves of our minimum wage above $15 an hour in the county. So that already happened. So some of these employees that aren't necessarily getting a raise through this already got a raise because we thought it was so necessary at the time for us to actually be able to attract hospitality aids and some of these other things. Same thing with the deputies. In my first budget, we came with an amendment to give deputies a $3 an hour raise per hour across the board because it was critical that we have people on the roads and doing public safety. So a lot of these raises came, but I really want to stress the fact that this is, number one, we know it's not perfect. And I think that we did a great job with what we could with $2 million. I want to let you know that we really let math drive how we did a lot of the adjustments to get people to where they are. This is a great stepping stone, but it is not the finish line. We will be bringing back another look at our compensation schedule. We'll take another look at how we do our merit raises and how we do a cost of living raise. We're going to take another look at the benefits in our county to make sure that we are a place where people want to have careers again, because we have essential services that we have to offer. Unlike my private business, we can't just close our doors, and we have to be competitive for that. So we know it's not a perfect system, but we think what we did bring up was very, very good. But there's other personal touches in this, even though we let the math drive it. We looked at equipment operators throughout the county, and we noticed that it's not the same. I can't remember, here we are on the anniversary of 2 highway workers that were killed. And I don't ever remember somebody being hit by a car while they plowed a runway. So we actually looked in this. An equipment operator at highway is not just an equipment operator at an airport or solid waste. They're a highway operator. And as much as we wanted to be the same across the county, we wanted to notice those certain individual differences. That there's a certain amount of risk that comes with kneeling on a center line while people are driving 65 miles an hour past you when they should be doing 55. And we wanted to address that. But it wasn't a personal look. And I think we did a really good job of looking at, I think Victoria, Dr. McGrath did a really great job of looking at the job duties and some of the risks across the board, and the recommendations really came from her. And I'm really proud of the team for what they put together, how you really let the numbers and the data drive you. And we really looked at this as far as positions and not so much departments or department heads that were better lobbying for their people than others. That I really believe we came to you with an adjustment that was more mind and less heart. And for that, I'm really proud of the team. Our county department heads and the budget that you guys passed was really hard to get to there. But if we hadn't have done that and we hadn't have budgeted this $2 million, this wouldn't have happened. So that's a credit to you and the budget that you guys help us pass. And with that, we'll open up for questions.
Supervisor Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't think I was going to have any questions before the meeting or even be qualified to ask them because I'm a short-term employee here. But I did come up with a few. So you allocated, or we did, $2 million for this process. My thinking is, how did you come up with this number, and is it enough? because $2 million divided by 900 employees is $2,222.22 per employee, or about 3% a year on an average salary of, say, $75,000. So, you know, inflation's 8%. How'd you come up with 2 million? Is it enough?
Short answer, no. Longer answer, it's what we could afford. Whatever we do today has to be sustainable. We can't put ourselves into a hole in the future. It needs to be something we can afford long term. Now, if the state comes together with some shared revenue and we have some more that comes in, we'll look again at what else we could do. We had to take some things off the table here. We weren't able to move all the ranges as far as we wanted to. So there are some adjustments that we had to make to get us to where we're at. So short answer, no, but I think we did a really great job with the 2 million that we had.
Okay, and then this question's for either or all three of you. As an appraiser, I understand what a market is. So can you define what the market is for wages and who the market participants are in the wage study? And then can you tell me what's the sample size? I understand in the report it shows 15 counties as market participants in your study, but did you look at private sector comparisons? Because to me, I mean, you know, only the higher level end of the wage study employees are going to move long distance for a job. So, you know, the short term, I mean, the lower end of the wage scale is going to be drawn from maybe a 3-county area at most. And, you know, I guess, did you use private comparisons, and how many did you use? Because, you know, in a statistical sample size, you got to have at least 29 in the sample for it to be statistically significant.
Dr. McGrath?
We did look at the private sector. What we do is I have a consultant that takes a lot of the positions that do have private sector counterparts, because obviously not every position within the county does. We search a lot of the websites to look at what the going rate is in your area, so that we're trying to balance between, if I'm a CDL driver, what can I make out at a construction site versus what I can make here. So yes, we are always looking at the private sector for those. We have to be a little careful with the private sector because obviously their benefits and some of the combinations that they can, that they can offer are things that, municipal government doesn't. So we do have to temper that a little bit with what the fiscal constraints are within government versus the private sector. But the private sector has definitely become a definite a competitor. They are reacting quicker to the inflationary issues that have been going on for the past couple of years. They're reacting quicker to the labor shortage that we have, and so they're making decisions much quicker than government can. So yes, we are very cognizant of the private sector.
Can you provide a list of the private sector sample that you drew from, specifically the number and who they were, so that we can get an idea of how to fill these positions more quickly and who we're competing with?
We could give you a list of the positions, I've tried to think, probably the list of positions that we looked at. And again, we use the recruitment sites, we use salary.com, we use Glassdoor, we do payscales.com, and it's just really kind of a listing of just all these jobs and starting salaries. So it's probably not that meaningful for you, but I could see what I can pull together on that.
Most of our competitors are in the local market here, and those seem like more regional or national statistics. So, can we get a sample of local market participants from the private sector that you've looked at, so that we can determine whether we're competitive here locally? That's my question. Thank you.
Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to pretend to understand the adjustment changes, but I believe upon the track record that we've had recommendations from 2016 and the shortfall and disappointment in the outcome and the need to dig further into this study, I would be much more confident with a second opinion, perhaps from one of the professor consultants at UW Oshkosh, reviewing this recommendation as we commit to go forward.
Supervisor Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, could you remind me how many employees the county has in total? And including both salary and hourly wage?
Well, of course, it fluctuates.
Right.
We've got, on the table of organization, off the top of my head, I want to say it's around 1,100, give or take. Does that sound about right, Mike?
On the TO, but then plus their temporary casuals.
Right. We have,
so forth.
right, additional temporary and casuals. And obviously, we have quite a few vacancies. We have over 100 vacancies right now. So we're looking at, we have about 900 employees right now that would have been looked at and either qualify for an adjustment or not. But overall, it's about 1,100 positions, give or take.
Okay, and just a follow-through, because someone did reach out, I'm going to echo the same question that Supervisor Binder had on that. I think I would be remiss if I didn't ask. But out of those 1,100 employees or so, I will admit I was approached by 5, so that might not be a good representation. There is a concern when there's words being used like reslotting, and the short answer is no, and 1/3 not receiving a pay adjustment, because some are perceiving this to not be fair. So my real question is, how is that going to be addressed in your meetings to the employees to make them feel comfortable?
Sure. Good question. That's really one of the reasons why, I tell employees I don't like surprises. I don't think they like surprises. That's one of the reasons why we're trying to have open communication and dialogue with employees. We had 3 meetings today with employees, and I said I think we have 7 more scheduled this week, and we're looking to schedule additional ones next week. That's to go through the compensation study that was done, explain basically how we got here, some of the history, where we're at, what we're proposing. And again, the goal of this wasn't necessarily to ensure that every person got a raise. The goal was to make sure that we could say that every person is in a position where their pay grade's been reviewed and is aligned more closely with the market than what it had been before, and that we recognize the length of service that they've spent in that role. If an employee is already at or above that market rate, it's hard for me to justify doing an adjustment, especially if it's at the expense of other employees who would need a larger adjustment.
That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Beam.
Yeah, I'll make one question really long. Yeah, this person that was making $3 more than the market rate, it sounds like she or he might be a go-getter. And so if that's the case, they are getting punished by having everybody else who maybe is not a go-getter getting paid more while they stay stagnant. And is there a punishment in this program for the calling sick every Monday people?
Short answer is there has been punishment for the last 5 years and then some. We have offered only merit pay for our best employees. Our best employees have had to claw and scratch for a 1.5% to 2% raise every year. So yes, this is evening that out. So the bad news is we're going to get rid of some of that merit separation. The good news is the merit separation from your best employee to the guy that barely shows up is not much of a difference. They're not wiping out a lot, which is why when we come back in June or July for a new comp plan so people can actually move through the range, we will fix that going forward. There has not been a lot of incentive for people to show up every day and bust their tail. I got 3 highway guys behind there that probably agree with that statement, that we've had them fight so hard for such a minimal raise, and that's something that I think we have been punishing them for a long time. That's something that we want to look to the future to fix. That's why I keep saying this is a good first step.
And is the punishing of the hardworking people, is that being hindered in any way? It seems like where are the department heads and asking for these merit raises that aren't given, or has there been a limit on how much they could be given?
I mean, the short answer is even if you were an exemplary employee in some years, that was maybe a 0.5% or 1%. It's just how the system was set up. And again, in the presentation in 2016, what came to the board was both a cost of living raise and a merit raise. And on the floor of the board, there was an amendment to take away the cost of living raise. So when we do the adjustment to the range every year, that was supposed to be a part of all employees, and we didn't do that. So hopefully when we bring this back in June or July for that portion, we can get that right.
Good, thank you.
Supervisor Bender.
Going back to my original question, back in 2016, when you did the study, the county executive assistant was a pay grade 21 at $51,995. Now, in 2023, you're doing this study, and you raised them to a pay grade 71 with a starting pay of $95,115. What changed in that position that justified raising that basically over $45,000?
I'll let Dr. McGrath answer that, because that's where all the adjustments came from. Did not come from my office. Dr. McGrath, can you still hear us?
Yes, I am, but I apologize. If there was a question, I did not hear it.
I believe the question was the county executive, the assistant to the county executive, how did you come up with the slotting for that position?
If I understood your question correctly, and I apologize, it's getting a little garbled. In 2016, I did recommend that we both got a merit, you got a merit increase, but you also you had to change the schedule and people had to get that salary increase. I wasn't a part of making any decisions as to what you actually implemented at that time, and nor did anybody ask what we should do going forward. So that was the original recommendation, that you have both of those, because without both of those, you're back to kind of where you are. The salary schedule keeps moving, but people don't keep moving, and then you end up getting into this compression situation. So hopefully that was the question. I apologize if I answered something totally irrelevant.
That was not the question that was asked. The question was particular to my assistant position in the county executive office. How it went from...
I can basically say it.
Yeah, please repeat.
In 2016, you did the study, and you rated the county executive's assistant at a class 21 at $51,995. Now in 2023...
Again, I apologize.
So
you
get
got
the
kind of
whole thing.
garbled with your question. So...
Now you have them rated at a 71 at $95,115, which is about a $45,000 increase. What changed in that position to warrant a $45,000 increase?
Could someone go up to the mic and repeat that question?
Dr. McGrath, the question was regarding the executive assistant for the county executive. Back in 2016 to the recommendation today, there's about a $45,000 difference, an increase in that position. The question is how that's justified.
Sure. Thank you very much, and I apologize for the hearing issues I have on my end. Obviously, what I'm looking at each time is I'm looking at what are the job responsibilities at the time of the position. So back in 2016, what were the responsibilities of that position? What was it doing? What was the education, skill level, et cetera, required for that position? And then what was the market comparable to that? The same thing was done this time, is looking at what were the skills and responsibilities required of this position now, because it has changed drastically from when it was back in 2016, just like there are other positions that we had to move to different pay grades because the job responsibilities back when we looked at it originally in 16 2016 have changed. So looking at now what is the new scope of responsibilities, what's the education, what's the experience, and then looking at the market comparative to saying, okay, what are other positions being paid with similar skill sets? You always are going to have a position or two that is going to kind of really change within the salary schedule because you've evolved, you've changed responsibilities, you've changed scopes of information. And, you know, sometimes maybe what we should really do is change the name dramatically because people still think of it back of what it was back in 2016. But you did have a couple of positions that really have changed in scopes of responsibilities, what's the expectations, what's the accountability, and then matching it to the market. I personally don't look at people's names. I don't know people. That's one advantage of having me do these types of studies is because I don't have any knowledge of whether it's a good employee or a bad employee or whatever it is. I'm really concentrating on what's the education, skills, knowledge, accountability, decision-making, technology skills, financial skills, and how that relates to similar types of positions.
And my second question, I don't know if you know it or not, but our seasonals make over $16 or make $16 an hour this year. We have numerous people in this county that aren't going to make $16 an hour. How do you think that makes them feel when they're a full-time employee of Winnebago County and we're not going to pay them as much as we pay a seasonal? I don't know if you realize that or not when you looked at the pay adjustment, but it, you know, I think it's pretty sad when we got full-time employees that work here 100%. This is their livelihood, and we're not going to pay them what we pay a seasonal. I think that we basically need to pay the bare minimum. Starting pay at this county should be $16 an hour.
Supervisor Dowling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Ms. McGrath as well. I was just curious to know if you could refresh our memories with how much you were paid to give the presentation.
The presentations are part of the entire package, so I don't get paid extra to do the presentations.
And what was the package price?
It's part of the whole process of what it is. I think the only thing I would charge you for is if I actually came there in person, travel is charged. I do that separately nowadays because travel is not necessarily always convenient or easy to do. But no, I don't get anything extra for doing presentations.
Supervisor Dowling, if you're asking how much we spent on the compensation study?
Yes, thank you.
Oh.
I can't give you an exact number. I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it was around $68,000.
Okay, perfect. Then my request would just be that if we do this again in the future, we either use a different company or we pay for them to come in person because the Zoom thing is a little ridiculous. I would also request a copy of the presentation that was given since it's not included in our packet tonight. Thank you.
I will note that Dr. McGrath was scheduled to be here in person. However, she has had medical issues that has precluded her from being able to travel. And I agree, having her come via Zoom is certainly not ideal. And I think, you know, from seeing her in the past in person, there's certainly a different dynamic. And I think we all would have benefited from that had she been able to be here.
Correct. No, and I absolutely understand that, especially with the medical issues. A representative would have also been appreciated. Thank you.
And again, I do apologize for not being there in person. I would prefer to be in person.
Supervisor Challenger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if one of you gentlemen could comment about how this proposal would affect folks under a collective bargaining agreement.
Well, we only have one collective bargaining agreement right now, and that's with the deputies. So deputies' pay is completely controlled by that agreement and has no bearing on this.
Perfect. And then the subsequent, when you talk about the HR policies and other things that are coming down the line, that would be, is the intention for that to be across the board or to affect both represented and non-represented employees?
Well, it would apply across the board so much as it can.
Okay.
If there's specific things in the bargaining agreement, that would be the controlling document.
Okay, thanks. So I know you haven't done your full rollout for employees, but I was wondering if you could comment on some of the pushback that you've, or concerns that employees have presented you as you've begun to roll this out?
So far, I think, and again, we've only had 3 meetings with employees, so keep that in mind. Some of the concern is, someone's been here 26 years, and a year ago, they took a promotion, and so now, the way we're looking at things, it's not your time with the county, but it's your time in position. Now, some of those employees, of course, employees have not seen how this could shake out, how it would impact them directly. But the concern is, I've been a long tenured employee, and now I'm potentially not getting any adjustment because I've only been in this position for a year. That's one concern. And some of our response to that is, we're still looking at them. By taking that new position, if they've promoted, they're in a higher pay grade, they have a higher earning potential. And really for those employees, one, we're making sure everyone is in a more properly aligned pay range to the market, and that their pay is appropriate to length of service. But the real difference is with that next bite of the elephant. When we make adjustments to the merit pay policy so that employees can have a meaningful movement throughout the range, that's really the dynamic that's going to change things long term, as well as those cost of living adjustments. Because right now, if an employee's merit raise isn't equal or above the cost of living adjustment, they're actually moving backwards, and that creates in-range compression. We want to fix that problem once and for all.
Thanks, that's really helpful. I think certainly the idea of creating that earning potential is really, sounds like a really good plan where we need to be, and puts a lot of onus on this board to live up to that promise year after year to actually fund that potential. My last question is, besides a job description, what went into evaluating where a position would fall in the gradient? Were there interviews with supervisors, or can you just go through that process for me?
Well, to go through that process, let me step back to 2016. In 2016, it was post-Act 10. The collective bargaining agreements were expiring or had expired. We had, I don't know, I know it was well over a dozen different pay schedules. We had 19, thank you, Mike. We had 19 different pay schedules. The study at that time took all those 19 different pay schedules, came up in essence with this system. So that's where that's kind of the fruit of where this system came from. And then again, we didn't implement all the recommendations from Dr. McGrath. That certainly exacerbated a few things. But back in 2016, it was a much different study. It was a lot more heavy lifting. We had employee meetings. We met with departments. We didn't have position descriptions that really aligned well with doing a market survey. So we had projects and surveys, and there was a lot with it. I would characterize this study as we're really kind of refreshing what had been done. And so the focus had been on labor markets, market rate, and pay adjustments, because we already had those other pieces. There were meetings with department heads, some meetings with employees. Obviously, we're rolling out meetings now with employees. We plan on doing future meetings regarding benefits, soliciting feedback, things like that. So we really want to not only be communicating well, but make it a collaborative process where our employees feel like they have some input.
Okay. Could you, so I just want to ask it again. That was really helpful background, but besides the job description, what went into deciding where a job fell, a position fell in the gradient this time?
Yep. I'll answer, and then if Dr. McGrath has anything to add. It's a position description, but then it's also looking at market comparables. So in the executive summary you have, it lists I think it's 16 different counties that we used as comparables, in addition to what she looked at privately for private sector. Those typically being the counties that touch Winnebago County, the counties that touch those counties, and then select other ones that are similar. Again, it's looking at what's our current pay for those types of positions, what do other counties pay for those positions? What do some of the private sectors pay for those positions? I don't know, Dr. McGrath, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, in addition, I did not speak with department directors, but the two of you did, and we had them fill out a questionnaire about what positions were problematic, what issues did they have concerns over, and what positions have dramatically changed since the last time of the study. So I got that information in writing from department directors. They did a very good job in making sure they articulated those concerns. Any positions that changed dramatically, we either got updated job descriptions for them, or back in 2016, we had individuals complete something called the position questionnaire, which gives us significantly more information about it than a job description does. So any position that changed dramatically, or people felt that the job description was no longer appropriate, completed that document as well. So it wasn't like in 2016 where we had everybody, you know, all positions completed. It was just those that were different. So I think we used a variety of ways in which to try to determine, A, what are the skills and responsibilities of the position, and whether or not they were consistent with what I had in the way of job descriptions previously, or what was changed.
Thank you very much.
Supervisor Plome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question, Director Habeck. I have a number of them, so I'll start with the first one. I've been approached by a employee who's been at Winnebago County for 21 years in the child support department. Her concerns largely stem from the fact that this seems like an incomplete study, in her opinion, and that we're taking care of the entry level and the middle end, but we're not necessarily looking at our more tenured employees, specifically the ones that have been here for 20 so odd years. And I know that you've covered that at length with a number of other questions tonight. My question is that when other counties and the way they compensate their more tenured or senior employees, do we run the risk of falling behind regionally if we don't do something to possibly look at that in the near future? You said this was a starting point. Mm-hmm. I guess where does that go from here? What would be the next steps so that we don't have a brain drain of our more tenured employees over time?
Well, a couple of things. I think we're always run the risk of that if we're not keeping a pulse on where our compensation schedule is across the entire board. I think there's a significant difference in the way we're trying to implement change in this study than 2016. 2016, again, we did not adjust any employees based on any length of service or anything. So this is a very different change. The way I explain it in the employee meetings is really there's three things we're balancing. We're balancing that recruitment piece, raising the minimum, balancing, adjusting employee pay, and doing it within that $2 million. Mm-hmm. If we would have had more, whatever more is, we could have been aggressive in either or both of those. And I understand where employees have concerns like that, but employees also necessarily haven't seen how it's going to impact them. So that same employee very well may be in line for a raise, and it may be significant. I don't know. And that employee, in their defense, they don't know that either, because we haven't disclosed any of that other than the framework. But I would say that we've got about 1.4 million, give or take, out of the 2 million are going towards the reslotting of employees. So I think that's a pretty significant investment.
Okay. And then the next question I have is overall, kind of tying everything together from the study, does this leave us as a more competitive employer in Northeast Wisconsin as a county, or is this a Band-Aid on a larger issue? Your kind of honest opinion about where this leaves us.
Well, it definitely is going to position us better. However, as the executive said, this really is step one, because part of making things better is also looking at how do we do vacation? How do we do time off? How do we do some of these differential pays? How do we do, the consultant has recommended, stipends. We've never done stipends before. Or do you look at this type of pay or that type of pay? So there's a lot of things like that that go into that package of keeping us competitive. That's one of the challenges I like about this study, and the position I'm in is trying to look at those things to make sure that we can really be and employer of choice. One of the things the executives talked about, a quick aside, outside of pay, it's also about culture. It's about, do employees feel appreciated? Do employees feel that their work is valued? Are they respected by their peers, by their supervisors? There's a lot of those types of things. He says all the time, please and thank yous are free. And so there's a mind shift that we have culturally to make. And different departments are at different places within that, but that's certainly a big piece, and that doesn't cost us anything, frankly. But there's always the risk of what can we offer, but also how do we sustain it? Because if you were to increase the dollars for this, but we can't sustain it moving forward, that actually probably puts us in a worse position. Yep.
Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These other steps that you said we have to do, the merit pay system, the benefits package or benefits, when do you think you'll be bringing those forward to the board? I mean, within the next year or what? Because I talk to some employees, and sometimes they hear other places have different or better benefits than us, and that's one of my concerns. When do you think these other parts of this plan are going to be presented to this board?
Well, the executive has been giving the direction that he hopes to have it to the board in June or July. So certainly we want to bring something sooner rather than later. If we're going to talk about a change of things like, for instance, vacation, the consultant has recommended considering going to a PTO system. We could do that. We could make other adjustments. There's things we could do, but if we make those changes, we need to communicate that to employees in a timely manner. And that impacts if someone, say, typically takes a cruise in February. If we change how we do vacation, that may impact that. If we're going to change merit pay, we start evaluations right away in September. We need to know what those evaluations are going to look like. We're going to start the budget in June. So how much is going to be allocated for cost of living, which we don't even have approved yet, versus merit pay? We need to have that sorted out because we're working on budget. So really the answer to your question is as soon as possible. We're looking at summer, and of course there's a lot of moving parts, plus finance and HR, we're doing a Munis upgrade. April and May, we're doing some other software upgrades. There's a lot of other things that are going on, but really our intent is to tackle this compensation study in whole this calendar year and bring things for your consideration as soon as possible, with really a timeline of this summer.
Another question I have is, some of the changes that we did last year, I forget what it's called, it's when an employee comes from another county or another municipal or wherever government, and they get the same type of packages like vacation and that as they got there. That's now standard for any department, right? Am I correct in that?
No, that's a lateral transfer policy. Lateral. That was approved specifically for the represented deputies at the sheriff's office.
So have we thought about doing that for every single department, and would we be doing that in soon? I mean, that's more of a recruitment tour than a retention, but more recruit.
In some ways we do some of that right now. I mean, every time that we make a job offer to an employee, now vacation's pretty standard. Vacation, we have a set schedule, so vacation is pretty much where it is. But from a hiring standpoint, as far as pay, we're looking at experience, education, those types of things, and trying to make a competitive offer. But again, part of the issue we run into in HR is that if we have existing employees, as Dr. McGrath talks, clogging up that hiring range, it makes it difficult. Now, could we look at some type of adjustment to vacation for those outside the county? We certainly could. I'm sure we will. But again, the balance is how do we recruit and be an attractive employer for someone applying, but at the same time, we want to recognize the employees that have been with us. I don't want to recognize a new employee at the expense of employees that have already been with us long term, and potentially give a new employee something that we haven't given people that have given decades already to this county. So it's a balance.
I'll just end up by saying I'm looking forward to what the benefits come up with study. I investigated one a few years ago. It was more controversial, which I got kind of shut down by your department. But then there's another one. I know I watched the last Parkview meeting about tuition reimbursement. I know it's a very big issue, a hot issue in some departments, especially in Parkview. And I'm very interested in that, and I'm more than willing to support a countywide policy or system on that. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me thank you for bringing this forward and getting it done. Hopefully, we can move on from here with some adequate compensation for the employees. Like other comments that have been made, I have two observations also. One is Parkview Health Center. We're all aware of the situation there. We have a lot of empty beds, and we can't get people to take jobs and work out there. So specific to that issue, I would refer you to pay grade 56. Do you have a copy of that with you?
Yes. It's on
That's
page
Appendix
24.
A, so it'd be page 24. You'll note there that pay grade 56 is at a minimum of 1531. That's exactly the same number it is in the old schedule. And back to the issue of getting people to work at Parkview, I would suggest that pay grade should be deleted and move those three positions up to pay grade 57 in an effort to continue the incentive to get people hired at Parkview. And then in the other one, I guess I can't.
Could I comment on that
Oh,
for just a
certainly.
minute? One of the challenges that we have, in essence, what you're suggesting is what we would call reclassifying those and moving those into pay grade 57. Part of the challenge with that is that, for instance, like the food service assistant would then be in the same pay range as the cook. So in that case, if we put the food service assistant into grade 57, we really should move the cook into range 58. And then we'd have to look in range 58 to see if there's, any conflicts with having the cook position in there. But then also the cook position, for instance, may be higher than what the market is.
More CNAs will apply to be a cook because it's the same pay grade, so we'll actually lose certified nursing assistants, which are much harder to recruit than the hospitality aides are.
So one
unintended
suggestion or one comment I would have on that is, now granted, Dr. McGrath has recommended these, but instead of completely changing grades, we could look at a different amount.
At least adjust the starting pay
Yes.
upward.
Yes, absolutely.
I merely offered a suggestion.
Yes.
I'm getting a lot of pushback,
Yeah.
but I think the
Well,
compromise might
I just
work
wanted
well.
to kind of point out, it's almost like a game of Jenga is
Yes.
when you pull a piece.
If I may, real quick, none of these three positions are considered careers. They're starting points. It's the hospitality aide is for a high school kid to come in and work next to a CNA, and then we bring her through our CNA program to turn her into a CNA. These three positions are simply for people that don't qualify for a career because they don't have the experience, a way to bring them in entry level and then bring them into the county. So none of these three positions are meant to be Winnebago County careers, only a way in the door.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation. Hopefully, we're able to get those people to come in, though. My other one is reference to Supervisor Binder's comments and perhaps others, and that deals directly with your administrator, assistant to the county executive. That is a huge step. I believe, sir, you make, as executive, you're at 118,000?
I believe so.
Okay.
You have to ask my wife. I don't actually get my checks.
So we're saying here then that the control point for the person that advises you is only 15,000 under you. So I suggest perhaps that position has been perhaps misappropriated a little bit. Perhaps grade 70 would be more appropriate for that. You're the executive. Everything's your responsibility. Your assistant advises you, but there needs to be 15, 20,000 bucks between the two of you at least. Otherwise, the advisor's almost making as much as you. He might as well have your job.
Well, I would
Think about that.
I would respond to that two ways. Number one, I don't think we'd say that to the sheriff's department, where Todd Christopherson should make $15,000 less than the sheriff.
Well,
And it's more of a deputy position. And let me respond a little bit to that. Back in 2016, the executive assistant answered phone calls for constituent services and filled schedules. And he would show up
Just
to
want
an
to let you know, we're not getting off on that.
No,
table.
correct. No, I'm just talking about
Talking about the person.
I'm not talking about the person. I'm talking,
It should be the person, that's all we're looking at.
right,
We're
well,
looking at-
what should be the position, really,
Well,
and,
position, I
and
mean.
how we're
Correct,
doing
I'm
it.
Sorry, but
Right.
don't start way back.
So, no, correct, but think of it as a deputy. I'm using it as a deputy, much like our human services has a deputy, much like a lot of departments have a deputy. And if it wasn't for the capacity and the role, I mean, if this position was just answering phones and doing the schedule, I agree with you. It's probably, that's 60,000 or 50,000 is probably overpriced for just answering the phone and doing schedules. But if it wasn't for the capacity of how I'm using this position, we wouldn't be listening to presentations for a neighborhood improvement grant tonight. I wouldn't have the capacity to do that. We wouldn't have agenda item reports at your desk. We wouldn't be going through a building study. We definitely wouldn't be talking about a strategic plan. There are a lot of things that I think has been underused for a long time. That is why we had so many silos. There is no way for one guy to run 18 departments by himself. So I've used that position. I decided I need that position to help me to collaborate with all these departments to get them to work together, which is what we've been doing. I've used this position like, here's the things I need to do. I need you to do some of the administrative end on it and help coordinate. So we split meetings. We divide and conquer is how we do it. And he does advise me, especially when it comes to county government, because I didn't really know the ropes when I got here. But that's a two-way street. I also direct him, the position. And that position, you know, if you would ask department heads, I think is been why we are getting some of these things done in the county that have been a long time coming. So the job duties of that position, I would say would be the justification of where it is. And to be honest, I argued with Mark and Dr. McGrath that we felt it was too high. And the response I got back from them is that this is what the position does. If this person, to do what they want to do, if you want to recruit somebody to do that job in the future, no matter who the person is, no matter who the executive, that is the range you need to recruit that person. That is why Director of IT went up a range. It was the only department had to move up a range, because in this day and age, to attract a director of IT that you need in the digital world, that is where the range needs to be. And I had no hand in that, but hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
Well, it does, but let me say, and I have great respect for your administrative assistant. I think he's a very capable man, very intelligent person, and I'm sure he's been a great asset to you in your first term in government without prior experience, obviously. So I don't question his qualifications. I, at this point, don't question his need to assist you. I simply question the bracket he's been put into. I think it's about at least 10,000 bucks a little too high.
He would be right there with you because he argued the same thing.
Yes, that's kind of where I am. So
my assistant didn't want it to be about him. He begged Mark to drop it at least one grade because he didn't want that heat And again, the pushback came from where does that position, that quality position, need to be in a range for somebody who's actually going to be able to do that job, no matter what the county is, no matter who the county executive is. What does it take to grab that type of talent to affect the types of things that we need? So I don't think you would be hurt if you wanted to drop that down a grade.
I
is what I'm saying.
really, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the recommendation from McGrath, and certainly from yourself, Mr. Hopkins, but the decision to approve that is this board's responsibility. And I think we can achieve, perhaps putting him in a different grade, one lower perhaps, and address all of the concerns this board might have.
And I would
And
not
get
be
it passed
opposed to
and
that.
Get it done, because there's a
Right.
lot of employees that are waiting for this.
I would not be opposed to that. For this process, I wanted to make sure that my hands weren't on any moving parts. I wanted to make sure that whatever Dr. McGrath and Mark brought together and came up was your decision to make those adjustments. I made noted adjustments on my own. I think the only thing that I actually said in the entire process is that we really need to listen to the highway guys when they say they do a different job than other operators. It was the only input that I really pushed on. So I appreciate that, and I completely agree
A
with you.
specific point of order, when this comes to the board, is this a take it or leave it, or is this subject to amendment?
Yeah, I believe you
I
could,
did-
yeah, it can be amended.
Oh, it can, okay.
Correct.
Other than that, I want to congratulate you guys for doing a good job, and it's about time we get it done, so we got to keep our employees here and keep them working. Thank you.
Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to direct this first to those of you up in front. I don't know who it is who deletes the request to speak, but I was number 4 and then got dumped and now was down to 12. So I don't know if that's the IT person, the county clerk, or if that's you, Mr. Chairman, but you got to be careful about deleting people who have a request to speak. This is the 4th time since December that I've been knocked off the schedule for speaking.
I
Enough of
push a
that.
number, and if your number is up there, I push it. If the one next to it or something happens, I can't do anything about it, because all
I
I
was
do is
supposed to be
push a button.
right after Supervisor Hanson. Okay, you made this nice presentation on paper that was on a screen, that's in the upper right-hand corner of the room, and I'm in the lower left-hand corner of the room, and if even Supervisor Dowling, who's in the first row, couldn't see it, you can believe me, I couldn't see it. I don't know why we have these presentations without paper so we can actually look over these numbers and these charts. We've talked about how we increased the RNs, the LPNs, and the CNAs at Parkview, but there are cleaning crews at Parkview who are cleaning up urine and feces and vomit, and they didn't get an increase with the COVID increase. If we were going to try to look at drawing people in, we need to work at Parkview. We have at least one neighborhood and possibly a neighborhood and a half or two that are closed because we can't staff it with nurses. That's unheard of. I don't know if we're going to be forced to vote on this thing, even if it's less than what we need. I think this whole thing seems to screw over our county employees, and I hate to see that happen, although we may be forced to accept it just to get them something. Apparently we have enough money to offer an 82.9% increase to the county's, the executive assistant, the assistants, and I'm not sure what I don't have a PhD, I don't know what the job scope that Dr. McGrath looked at, but if it included urinating on female social workers, I'm not sure if how that's ranked in there, but apparently it's worth 82.9% an increase. I'm outraged by this. I want to see our county employees being compensated fully, but this does not do it, and it's completely skewed in some places and knocked off with people getting nothing in others. I'm not happy with this at all. And from now on, when there's a presentation on that screen, I'd like to see, otherwise don't even show it. If it can't show up on our tablets, or we can't have a paper copy to look at, I don't know why they go to that much trouble. We can't see it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I was just told it was in your mail packet. Supervisor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that the employee presentation was excellent. It helped me out a lot. And my question is, are the seasonal employees, do they get benefits?
No, they do not.
So their compensation is just strictly cash?
Correct.
So that's probably why they're higher, correct?
Well, I think they're actually at $15 an hour. Mike, can you confirm that?
I think that's right. I don't think it's 16. But I can check.
I thought the park ranger was 16.
Park ranger is higher than most of the seasonals, yes. And there's some higher rates if you've been there several years or multiple years. Just be a second, almost have it here. So the lead seasonal laborer at parks makes 16, and the park rangers make 16. The general seasonal laborers start at 15, go up 25 cents for each year additional service up to the fourth year. So most of them start at 15. There are the two specific positions that start at 16.
Supervisor Haran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a quick question, and that is that I'm going back to Mr. Bender's point. We're talking about job descriptions here. I would like, because I'm new to the board, I would like to know what the job description was in 2016 and how it has advanced to 2023 for that enormous jump. Thank you.
You gonna send it to her, or?
Yeah, I can send that to you. I'll email that to you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very interesting. Appreciate the presentation. It's great. First, I'm glad we're doing something and not refusing to do something like we did in 2016. It kind of upsets me that when there was a cost of living opportunity, we did not, obviously people before us did not vote for it. So I hope we consider that in the future coming up. I know we have, you said 1.4 of the million has been spent for this package, roughly, right? Or what was it?
We actually, if this gets approved, we would be spending all 2 million. My point was that approximately 1.4 would be for the employee adjustment, and the remainder would have been to raise those minimums.
Okay.
So the full 2 million would have been spent, but the focus this time, unlike last time, was really on employee adjustment.
Okay. And then the next thing is, again, I want to keep the employees that have been here for a long time, to encourage them to stay, because that's what this is about. I mean, we're looking for new people, I understand that, but we have to go to the other side. And I guess I'm thinking, like, if you have a person that's been here 15, 16, 17 years, and they're doing the good job, like the job could go anywhere else if they wanted to, but they want to stick with it, and an opportunity comes up and they decide to take it before all this came up. So they take the opportunity, which takes on more work, so the pay might be just a little bit more. But then as you look at this going down here in the next couple of months, it's like, holy cow, if I kind of would have stayed where I was, I would have got a lot more money, but because I took the advantage to go and I wanted to keep my job, I'm missing out on the extra money that I could have got if I would have stayed back there. That's the way I understand it. It looks that way, okay? I think when you're doing this, that we should make consideration or take a look at those people. Because the 17, 18-year people, we want to keep them. If there's some kind of tweak we have to do, we have to consider that, because that's valuable. They stepped up, they took a job, and from what I understand, some of the county people are doing jobs that aren't really part of their job now. They were just asked to take on because so-and-so left and so-and-so left, and they're doing it. So when you take that step up, you're kind of covering 3 other jobs and wasn't much of an increase. So I just wanted us to make sure that we take into account that for those people. And the thing we have to realize, we're doing something that's really important. And second, that this is only a starting point. This is not the end of it, like, okay, this is it. Because I know I had heard from people that they thought this was gonna get swept under the table and nothing was gonna be happening. That was far from the truth. This is the first time they are doing it, and I'm sure this board here wants to do something. They were underappreciated for so long, and it's a fact. I mean, they said it once in 16, they're saying it again now. So these people are valuable, we want them to stay, but I want to make sure we cover everything that we're going through to consider. And the other last thing I want to say is, I don't want this to be stretched out. I mean, we're talking about it, you're having meetings, it would be great if us supervisors could be invited to some of those maybe, so we hear it, because otherwise, you know, we just heard about your 3 meetings today, so we had no idea. But that's going to be important, because we need to pass this at the end. We need to go forward, not backwards. So we have these couple of weeks to kind of iron out little things to get it going. Not one of those things we say, okay, we're going to table it, we're going to send it back to somebody else, because that's not what we need to do here. I'm just saying that, so I appreciate what you're doing, but I'm all for this and going forward and taking care of all of our employees. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I would respond to that. Two of the fears that I've heard from other people as we've been doing this so far, and again, we only did 3 presentations thus far, is number one, that this is going to get pushed back to a committee and delayed, and number two, when we come back in June or July, that's not going to pass, is the fear they have. And really, they want to know that there's a future. They want to know that there's earning potential. They want to know that we can be a little bit more flexible as employer. They want to make sure that, you know, that a PTO and sick time is beneficial. They want to make sure that they're being taken care of. So it was number one, that they're actually going to delay this, that it's not going to be done for them. And then number two, they're afraid of the ones that aren't getting the raise now, that we're not going to fix it in June or July. That has been the concern.
Supervisor Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for all of you as to how the compensation ratio was determined. Why, explain why you chose the average of wages and salaries versus the median of wages and salaries?
I can answer that. We typically have always used the average, and that's something that what in compensation practices is really using the average. We use the median if we have to, only because we have very disparate data. But averages really give us a very nice tight picture of where the position is, and then we use a statistical analysis around that average to eliminate any outliers. The median sometimes gives us too big of a spread for that. So we have to have at least 3 data points. They have to be pretty close together, and then again using that statistical analysis around that average. So that really is just very standard compensation practice. The only thing that's coming out of the current shortage of the labor pool, as well as the inflation rates, we are now having organizations that are compensating above average. So we're looking at, I've got a number of clients right now that we're building schedules at the 60th, the 65th percentile, because they want to have that competitive edge. So again, average is just a standard compensation methodology that is utilized.
Okay. You mentioned that this compensation plan as presented would take care of the entire $2 million that was set aside. So then if a proposal was brought forward in June or July to address cost of living or merit pay changes, how would we pay for that?
We would find that in the next budget. One of the things that we're working on now is a strategic plan and priority-based budgeting, so we can actually look at all the programs that we do in the county and see which ones actually have the outcomes that are desired, and allow you, the board, to give us the priorities of what to fund and how to fund it. I believe there's the wiggle room there. I believe there's efficiencies that we can find to fund this going forward, which is why we wanted to budget the 2 million this year, so it was already built into the budget going forward. Now, we did what we could with the 2 million. We weren't able to do bells and whistles. We weren't able to adjust all the pay grades as far as we wanted to. We weren't able to make all the salary adjustments we wanted to. Then again, by the time next budget, we'll have a better understanding if the state legislators actually come up with something with shared revenue. I mean, that's a big conversation, and that's likely. We don't know what the percentages are, but it's a lot closer than it has been in a long time. So this right now, I think we can afford. I wouldn't bring you anything that I didn't think we could afford long term. We have some very bright minds on this. I think between Mike and Mark and Paul in the back, that we will come up with a plan that we could afford. It makes no sense to give everybody a raise that you can't afford next year, and then we have to lay people off.
And the flip side of that is when we have a significant number of employees who will again forego an increase or a raise this year because the money is not available. If we pass a COLA in June or July, they get nothing this year. And that to me is unacceptable when the inflation rate over the last year and a half has been at 8%. And we're talking about increasing employees' pay. We have a big chunk of employees who will go yet again without a raise. And I think we need to do better by them.
And to credit to this board, you guys approved the largest raise that they've had in the last 10 years in this budget. They didn't get nothing. Outagamie got nothing. They all got a bonus for a COVID bonus, but got no raises this year, from what I believe. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I heard. I mean, they were waiting on a wage study. We did 4%, which is probably the largest raise that this board has passed in a while. My first budget, we did 3%, which was kind of unheard of at that time. So we have found every penny that we could. Again, department heads did a great job of finding a flat levy target in the 4% to make that happen. So we gave them as much as we could and budgeted for this adjustment, and we will find what we need to going forward.
But they're already behind.
Yep, correct.
They're behind. And so we need to do better. And I too have a very hard time accepting an 82% increase in a salary when we have positions at Parkview that are unfilled. We have neighborhoods, we have empty beds at Parkview because we can't staff it. We have a sheriff's department that's cutting services and is at emergency staffing. And we can only pay the minimum of $15 an hour in this new proposal, and we can't hire people. So if we can't hire people at that rate, then the market is telling us that that's not enough. And I think it's a real assumption on your part to say that that's just an entry-level job. That not meant to be a career. We cannot, I don't believe we can pass judgment on why people need a job or why they choose that job. We need to make sure that we pay something that is acceptable to them. If I wouldn't be able, if I had that job or the custodian job at $17 an hour, I would need another job. If I had $17 an hour at 40 hours a week, I would need another part-time job to support my family. And that's a real issue.
I agree.
And we have to talk about that and be honest with ourselves.
It'll be 2 years of me being in this position in April. 2 years. And this has been behind for a long time. In 2 years, in less than 2 years, we are ready to this point. When I got here, our minimum wage was around 12. Unacceptable. A lot of things were unacceptable. We are moving in the right direction. I completely agree with you. This is about as fast as anybody has moved government that I can tell. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
Supervisor Estero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. thank you for this study. I read through it, and just some things of note. On page 12, bottom paragraph, the overall tenure average of our non-representative employees is 10 years, showing, and the national average is in the public sector is currently 6.5 years, showing the county is higher than the average in overall tenure. I thought that was good. I found that the health insurance seemed to be that we were in good standing on that. I did note that as well. But I mean, I know that's another can of worms. I agree that handling things efficiently would be good. I was talking with someone yesterday in another county and she retired after 33 years or something, and she said being in county government has changed. It kind of like what maybe the law enforcement has gone through. She had sensed that people had not respected government like they used to, and I appreciate what we're trying to do here. I just wanted to mention that I'm very in favor of PTO. I wanted to ask real quickly if it's going to be a year out, when that might be looked at. I feel like that would be a very big incentive just to loop it all together or lump it kind of in a way and make it easily accessible for the employees.
If I could address two things. First of all, the 10 years is skewed because if you look at this, we have 55 employees that have been here for over 30 years. Stuart just retired. She was hired with Winnebago County when I was born. And I reminded her of that at her party, and she was not a fan of that. But the PTO and those adjustments we are looking to bring in June and July. We want to make sure we get it right. We want to make sure we get around, talk to employees, get plenty of input. But we are looking to have that before we really get into budget, so we can plan for that as we move forward. So we are not going to drag our feet on that.
Okay, thank you. And then let's see here. So I heard Supervisor Swan talk about comparables, local comparables, and that was important. And I didn't see in the study any comparables from other counties. I don't have to have those numbers, but I was wondering if Mr. Habeck is aware of what other counties, how we compare.
I don't have the specifics. Dr. McGrath is the one who pulled all that data, but if you look on page 5 of the final executive report, you will see the counties that she pulled data from.
Yeah.
And then you'll also note that we didn't get enough response for human service positions.
Okay.
So then we pulled additional counties listed below, so we had enough to come up with, necessary numbers on that. So those are the counties that were pulled. I don't have the specific responses. That's part of what the agreement with Dr. McGrath was, to collect, solicit, evaluate, and put that into this plan.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Supervisor Ponzer. You're the one that probably took the other supervisor's coat. Supervisor Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I thought it was really good. I do have just a couple of questions. The first is, you mentioned, as Supervisor Hand also mentioned in her comments, that we had a fair amount of positions that changed either in scope or job description. I am curious how many actually saw changes from 2016 as the analysis was performed? If you had a guess.
You mean how many positions changed
In scope?
In 2016?
Versus the current. So the last time we did it was 2016, right? How many switch grades? How many switch grades?
Dr. McGrath?
Oh. At one point in time, I was keeping track of what positions changed. I'd have to go to an old spreadsheet because when I do the first round of changes, I'll actually cross out what the pay grade is and then move it to the next pay grade. But I would say off the top of my head, we probably had about, 12, 13 positions that actually changed pay grades to 1 or 2 above. There's a couple that jumped a little bit more than that, and then they either stayed that way or we backed it off. But I think the concern is when I sit down to do a compensation schedule, I'm looking at all kinds of pieces of data, and all those pieces of data have to kind of fit together as a puzzle. And it's not just one thing that drives it. So we are looking, as I'm sitting and looking at a position, I'm looking at what does the minimum market say? What does the average market say? So how does that align with the position? So we're aligning it with the market. We're aligning it with, back in 2016, we actually did a point factor system. I tried to utilize some of those points from back 2016. Unfortunately, we didn't keep that system up. So I look at a position on 13 different competencies and then try to gauge those competencies with those within the same pay grade. So we're looking at that. We're looking at compression issues. When does the superior and versus the subordinate make, because there may be some overlap with those pay grades, but at what point in time does the higher level position start passing the lower level position? Because why would I take a promotion or move up if I'm going to get a pay decrease or I'm at the top of the schedule? So we need to look at compression. And then in some cases, we need to look at internal equity. Are the positions aligned appropriately for that? So there's multiple pieces of the puzzle that go into developing a compensation study. When you start saying, well, let's take a look and let's move this one position, that one position may have a whole domino effect of changes because of all of those different types of criteria. And are you still aligning it with the market? And then, where are you in relationship to other similar types of positions? So it's really a kind of a complex puzzle that goes together to get where we're at. And moving one or moving another may be, may be okay, but there were a number of positions that changed pay grades, and again, a number of them that were okay once we changed the distance between those pay ranges.
If I could just clarify, by position, we're not talking employee. There may be multiple employees in a position that moved. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, no, it might be a good idea to...
I have a partial answer to that if you want me to jump in. I've just been looking at the spreadsheet, and I count 20 positions who have actually changed grade as part of Dr. McGrath's current recommendations. Now, some of them, just based on my familiarity, I'm pretty sure that, I want to say probably half, that's just a guess, but certainly some of them are not based on changed duties, they're based on a changed market.
Okay.
If you have an HVAC specialist, it's not that the duties have changed, but it's that those skills have become more in demand, so in order to keep it at market level, you have to move it up a grade. So it's not only the skills and responsibilities of the position,
So
it's also market.
Are you saying that a very small portion of that was due to change in duties or scope? Most of it?
It's actually a combination of both. So I'm looking at, what are the job responsibilities of that position in relation to the external market's job responsibilities and aligning those. And if like I said earlier, the department directors gave me information about positions that have changed. So those positions that were identified as being changed, we're looking at what was back in 2016, what was it now, and is there a difference in those things that are going to create a pay grade change for it? So we're looking at both the skills and responsibilities of the current position. When identified which ones were changed, we made a special look at those as well. So it's a combination of both of those that would move a position. In some cases, it's purely market. CNAs is purely market. Their positions really haven't changed much at all, but we have a greater need for CNAs and a lower number of people that are going into it. So you look at some of those positions and it's really market driven. Others, it's a combination that the responsibilities have changed.
Okay, great. You mentioned actually, Doctor, you mentioned about the average, using the average for compensation. I'm curious, I understand totally what you're saying about the average. However, averages can be extremely misleading. I'm curious if you remember the spread of the average, like a standard deviation, or is it a tight cluster, or do we see a lot of divergence in our averages?
If I could have someone repeat the question for me, I
Yes,
lost some of it. I apologize.
It's the microphone.
Oh,
If anybody has had the pleasure of rewatching these meetings at Zoom, supervisor microphones are hard. This one actually crosses Zoom a lot better.
okay.
If you want, sorry.
Well, am I okay to go up and ask a question? Okay.
Sorry to make that
Apologize for making you move.
No, listen, we've been sitting for several hours now, so I'm all good with that. I'm awful with this, so where are you? No. Oh, sorry, my watch is telling me that it doesn't understand. Okay.
2 minutes.
Yes. I actually get 4 minutes. I get 4 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Come on, Doug. No, my question is, you had mentioned about the average when it comes to the comp. I'm curious that if you know the spread of the average, because averages can be very misleading. So I'm wondering if you could tell me, is it a very tight average in terms of distribution, or do you see a lot of divergence? So I'm really just asking the makeup of the average itself.
Yeah, so actually what we will do is we will come up with an average of what it is initially, and then we do, like I said before, a statistical analysis so that we will eliminate any outliers that are 1 or 2 standard deviations above or below that. It's a practice that if you've ever heard of World at Work, it used to be called the American Compensation Association. It's a practice that they subscribe to. I've taken a number of courses with them. And so when we come up with that average, it really is then performing that analysis after it to make sure that those are alleviated. But average is really kind of the standard practice. Like I said before, we'll occasionally use the mean if we have to, and that's usually for really difficult to find positions. Positions that don't have a lot of comps, but we have a couple of them that we might use the mean, or we've had situations, and it did not happen in Winnebago, where I have a number of comps that are really high and a number of comps that are really low, and if I start eliminating everything, I've got nothing left. But that did not happen here. Actually, your numbers came in very tight. They were nice ranges. I think part of it is because you've got so many folks around you that are doing compensation studies that we were able to get some really good data for the vast preponderance of the positions.
Okay, not seeing any other lights. I want to thank all 3 of you. A lot of good questions. If you have other questions you want to ask, give Mark a call. That's the HR director. He's got all the numbers right there. So that's the man to call.
Or feel free to set up a one-on-one with him, or any of us.
Right, either or. So, all right. If anyone needs to get up and use the restroom or whatever, go ahead. I'm not going to take a break. We're going to keep right on going. It's after 8 o'clock already. Next is Paul Kaiser, the Director of Finance with the Winnebago County ARPA update.
Good evening. I'm going to talk about ARPA and basically trying to reset what was done previously and go through some of the slides. There is a short video that I'm going to talk a little bit initially about. Initially, we're going to look at using 2021 expenses, but right now we're looking at using 2022 expenses going forward for ARPA. ARPA basically came out and they distributed funds to everybody before they even came up with a guideline to let people know what to do with them. So they sent.
There's something on all of your desks too, if you didn't see it.
They basically sent money to the counties, to the cities, to all the municipalities without any real guidance of what you're allowed to do with the money. So they came out with an interim rule, which was very gray and foggy, and the video will address that more. They finally came out with a final rule and gave a little bit more guidance. And basically, I got a couple letters. I had a lot of people talking about this is fishy, this is not true, we're doing something underhanded. What I have to say is this is not fishy, this is not misallocation or manipulation. This is exactly what the U.S. Treasury is saying we are allowed to do under the final rule and using the ARPA funds. So the final rule is basically the U.S. Treasury was realizing that people were not spending the money. They weren't really knowing how to spend it, how to get through all the regulations, the guidelines of what ARPA was requiring everybody to do. So they came out with a final rule to make it easier for people to be able to spend the money. Do I have the clicker or you? Which one? Okay, what did I just do? So this is just this is 1315, which is the final ruling, basically just describing what, basically the term lost revenue was used a lot, and I heard that, and when I first started, I thought, how did the county lose revenue? But I'll get into that. The video will explain the lost revenue. It's basically a calculation with the 2019 year being your base year, and then they are giving you a percentage that you can increase each year, 2020, 2021, 2022, if needed, through 2023, and then 2024. Basically, all it is a calculation to say, do you qualify for using ARPA funds as lost revenue, and what is the maximum amount you can use for lost revenue? What you're really doing is you're covering general service expenditures, which is a lot of cases is going to be mostly wages for the county. It is not using, that does not use federal grants. So there's a lot of departments like DHS that uses a lot of federal grants. So we try to stay away from using the wages from DHS. So it's most of the departments that are funded from general fund and their wages. Parkview is another one that does not have a lot of grants, so we use the wages from Parkview. So I will then, do you have the video? So it's about a 7-minute video, which I'm going to let the lady explain it. She does a lot better job than I think I ever could, and then I'll have a few more slides to go through and then take questions.
Hello and welcome to the second episode of Just a Tad. I'm Michelle Mark Levine, and TADs are GFOA's mini classes, 10 minutes or less, on an accounting topic. This episode is about revenue and expenditure recognition for the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds, CSLFRF, still quite a mouthful, but a little bit shorter than the full name. We will, in this episode, quickly classify the CSLFRF grants will review the rules for recognizing grant revenue in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, and on your schedule of expenditures of federal awards, or CFA, which is the foundation of a federal fund single audit. We'll explain a frequent source of confusion and then look at some model journal entries and CFA treatment over 2 years because cash receipts, eligible expenditures, and CFA recognition can cross between years. Lots of governments receive CSL-FRF, right, a grant program established by the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, affectionately called ARPA, right? And lots of the governments that got this money don't regularly receive a lot of federal funds. And if you don't spend more $750,000 or more of federal funds in a year, you don't have to have a federal fund single audit. But, you know, even those governments that get plenty of federal funds, have single audits every year, were somewhat confused because there was nothing normal about this grant program, right? ARPA was passed in early March of 2021. Cash advances started going to governments as early as June of 2021. And the only thing that we had to guide us was what the U.S. Treasury Department called interim final rules. Quite an oxymoron, right? As well as frequently asked questions, where the questions and the answers seem to change a lot. The final rule came out in January of 2022. So roughly 10 months after the legislation passed and more than 6 months after the cash started flowing. There are 4 kinds of non-exchange transactions, 2 of which are where we will find grants, including intergovernmental grant revenue. Now, because governments were forced to take these ARPA funds, this is a voluntary non-exchange transaction. But it doesn't really matter so much because all grants fall into roughly 2 categories. What we call and think of as purpose restricted and what we call expenditure driven. So we recognize revenue under GAAP when all of the eligibility requirements for the grant have been met. There are 4 kinds of eligibility requirements that can apply to a particular grant, right, based on the laws, the regulations, grant agreements, terms and conditions, etc. Right? Those that are subject to what we call reimbursement requirements are what we call expenditure-driven grants. So the problem is, it's not a great term because it's not really about reimbursement per se, so much as it is about the eligibility for the grant revenues being tied to a government having made, past tense, eligible expenditures. So key aspects of the CSL-FRF final rule make it pretty clear that it is an expenditure-driven grant program because the eligibility requirements pretty prominently include the incurrence of eligible expenditures. That's pretty similar to the conclusion that the Governmental Accounting Standards Board reached in their 2020 technical bulletin with regard to governments that received the Coronavirus Relief Fund created by the CARES Act that year. So simply receiving the CSL-FRF funds does not trigger revenue recognition in accordance with GAAP. Revenue from expenditure-driven grants cannot be recognized until the eligible expenditures have been incurred and identified. Now, that's not a term we usually hear in accordance with when we talk about grants, right? We just say incurred. But usually, the identification process is part of the claiming for reimbursements, right? That's when we identify specific expenditures with the grant revenue. Well, because we got this cash in advance, it's sort of its own step. We have to incur eligible expenditures in order to recognize the revenue, and the CSL-FRF final rule gave us several categories of eligible spending. One in particular, however, is causing a lot of confusion. So the amount that governments can use for this very broad category of government services, right, is set at either $10 million or an amount that's calculated using a specific formula. To determine the amount of revenue decline that affected the government during the pandemic emergency. So this is often called lost revenue. The fact that the amount is tied to lost revenue led some governments to kind of get confused and conclude that the loss of the revenue itself was the applicable eligibility requirement for the category. In fact, it's an expenditure-driven grant, so the expenditures for those eligible government services, that's what makes the government eligible for the grant. So let's take a look at some journal entries. All right, if we received
Don't think you want to go through the accounting, that's the boring part. Oh, okay. So basically, the next couple of slides are back to April. I tried to get some new ones. I talked to the GFOA, the WGFOA, and NACO, but I did not get any responses from them regarding. This is just a little more showing how little money was really spent and why they came up with a final rule. So basically, there were 3 tiers when you look at it for who got the money. There's a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 5. Winnebago County is a tier 2 because of our population. Anything that was a tier 5, most of the tier 5s received less than $10 million. So pretty much everybody that received less than $10 million took the $10 million rule instead of going through the trouble of doing the revenue loss calculation. It's kind of like with your taxes. Do you take the standard deduction or do you itemize? So if you can't itemize, you take the standard, that's the $10 million, which a lot of the counties did. Winnebago County got basically around $33.4 million. So we went through and we're looking at doing the more extensive revenue loss calculation only. It's not really revenue loss. It's a calculation that was given to us by the U.S. Treasury to use to see if we can use all of our ARPA funds for general service expenditures, which for the most part is wages, could be used for projects, could be used for other things. It's basically, I do have a accounting firm that is also working with me right now to define the revenue loss calculation, and then we're going to look at the actual general service expenditures. So this is a chart which kind of does highlight Tier 2, which is the blue line. This was back in April, which is all the way out to 80%. I almost guarantee you they're probably at 100% by now. And I'm pretty sure that the Tier 5 has moved out way past the 50 to 60% by this point. I was not able to get a new graph, but I did in another slide I'll show you later. But this does show you just another reference. Okay, I gotta keep advancing. This just highlights the square boxes. Winnebago County is looking at doing the revenue loss calculation to use the full $33.4 million as general service expenditures for 2022. If we have to, we'll look at 2023, but right now I think we'll be able to use 2022 expenses that we have already spent, which she said is in the past, to be able to reclassify as ARPA funds. So what that means is that we no longer have to go through the strict regulations to have projects done under the ARPA regulations. The money could be voted by the board to put into the general fund, but the recommendation was to create a special revenue fund, whether we call it the Spirit Fund or whatever it's going to be called, because then it can be tracked, it can be reviewed, it can be presented to the board, and it can be maintained and monitored and not thrown into the general fund where it could be spent for anything. So that is something that the county executive wanted to make sure we just didn't recommend putting it to the general fund, but create a special revenue fund that could be monitored, reviewed, and taken care of by the ARPA Commission. So another thing that they did in the final rule is, the big thing is the highlighted red box on the bottom is they went and they changed the formula. In the final rule, the interim rule said you could take your 2019 revenue, multiply it by 104.1%, determine what your revenue was for 2020, compare that to what your real revenue was, and that was your loss. So they raised that in the final rule from the interim rule from 4.1 to 5.2. So as you can tell, this thing has been constantly evolving to the final rule to get us to that point. So I did reach out to 70 counties and finance directors, and these are the ones who did respond to me that they have used either the $10 million, the standard deduction. Two of the counties, Fond du Lac County and La Crosse County, they went through the revenue loss calculation and they reclassified all of their ARPA funds as general service expenditures. So I just wanted to show some highlights of other counties have done this. Wisconsin has done this. That's why we've got the Neighborhood Improvement Fund, because they reclassified ARPA funds and we were able to get the Neighborhood Improvement Funds, which you're going to see presentations after I'm done with this one. I just included a county map in case you want to find out where some of these counties were, because I wasn't sure where they all were, even though I lived in Wisconsin my whole life. So this is the highlight of the revenue loss calculation. These are not the final numbers. This was my calculation I did by myself, and then I wanted to get some actual consulting from an audit firm that would actually give me a little bit better guidance and make sure that when we get audited in April, if this is voted by the board to go through with, that CLA does not come back and say that we did the calculation wrong. So this calculation is going to change, but like I said, as the base year is 2019, you multiply it by 5.2% to come out with your estimated what your revenue should be, comparing it to the actual revenue. So my initial calculation was $52 million. We've got $33.4 million. So what that tells you is, based on the calculation of lost revenue, we can use the full $33.4 million for general service expenditures that we've already spent. It's not a lost revenue. It's money we've already spent that we're going to use the ARPA funds for and recategorize them. She already mentioned this. It's an expenditure-driven grant, so I don't need to spend too much more on that. Again, it's for government services to the extent of the lost revenue calculation. So there's a big distinction. I always heard lost revenue being used. That's really just a calculation to find out how much you can use of your general service expenditures, which you've already spent. The general service calculation, we have to make sure we do not use any federal grants or any department that might use a federal grant. So anything that could be in and out, like I said before, DHS, just going to stay away from that because that could be an audit point. So this was my initial calculation of wages being used from the general fund in Parkview, where we have $33.39 million in ARPA funds. My initial calculation was 33.2. There were some also projects we could use that were done from the highway department that would fall into this. There was also a project, capital project done at the airport that would fall under this. The thing is, if you use something like that, you have to then go back and look at every single thing you've done under that project to make sure the bidding process was correct. And you got to make sure everything was done correctly for that capital project. Otherwise, they're going to go through audit that, and if you find something that wasn't right, they're going to kick that back out. So when you use wages, it's really clean cut and done, but that's why I went to get a little more expertise than what I have at this point. And the last thing is, when we're all done with this, we have to go into the government, and we have to report what we did, and they're going to review it. So it's the whole thing of, we're doing something, no, we're reporting to the government, and if we did something wrong, you better believe it, they're going to come and tell us. So it's doing all this work up front, recategorizing the ARPA funds so we can use them without the restrictions that the ARPA regulations put on us. And that's my presentation, so any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I thought we already voted on this. Is that not correct? Or is this like a new plan?
No, this was sent back to the ARPA Commission to review. So it was sent back, and then I got involved with this to put together this presentation. I already presented this to the ARPA Commission, and I think I did it to the PNF Commission, or committee already. So it was now to present it to the board.
Maybe I misunderstood. I thought we passed this part, and then when we tried to use some of the funds, it got sent back to the commission.
No, we didn't vote on the, you can probably answer this more than I can.
Because you've already done this, all this work then prior, didn't you, Mike?
There was a resolution passed in October
Right.
of 2022 authorizing use of the funds as a replacement for lost revenue or designation of the funds and authorizing it to be considered used for certain wages. Now, then there was the resolution or a whole set of resolutions to establish the Spirit Fund, take the money back out so we still have it in a separate fund as opposed to in the general fund balance, and a number of resolutions to spend the money. Those were not voted on. The first one was sent back to the ARPA Commission. Part of some of the concerns expressed that I think led the board to that action were with the appropriateness of the allocation of the lost revenue to wages. There were questions raised about whether we could do that at the Parkview, for Parkview wages, for instance, because of other possible grant sources. We've investigated that. That's not really a concern. It won't be a problem. But because of those concerns, the ARPA Commission is taking another look at the whole process, making sure we're completely legit and not doing anything unusual or misleading or, funny business, as Director Kaiser says. So it's just information to make sure that, we really are crossing the T's and dotting the I's in terms of how we're treating that lost revenue replacement funding leading up to, return of the resolution, maybe recognizing those expenses that will come back and establishing the Spirit Fund, which, if the commission votes to, will eventually come back to this board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really appreciate the presentation. I still think we should be looking at the standard deduction, and I say that because the last line of your presentation is what has always given me heartburn about this. When you said, we take this money, we move it over here, and then we can do whatever we want with it. And that's at the core of my objection to this since that October resolution. I don't think that this board should be taking the money, moving it over here so we can do whatever we want with it. I think that the funds should be spent for the purposes of ARPA, and that's what has given me the biggest concern. I wish we could have ended your presentation about 10 seconds earlier.
I not to interrupt you, but I think that's what the ARPA Commission is to do, is to make sure it's spent for ARPA projects, not whatever we want, or we would have just thrown it back to the general fund. So if I said that, if we moved it to the general fund, we could have spent it for everything we want. But if we create another Spirit Fund, a special revenue fund that's guided by the ARPA Commission, it's going to be spent on them projects.
I mean, we already have a framework to guide us to make sure we spend it in the appropriate way. That was set out by the legislation, by the rules. I hear what you're saying, but this is also a repeated pattern now where administration has told us that we're moving this money so we can do whatever we want. And that's the piece that doesn't sit well with me.
It's not whatever you want. It's what the ARPA Commission is going to recommend, but it's also, you have to keep in mind, if you do not have purchase orders, contracts, and people already scheduled to do the projects by 2024, the money goes back to the federal government. So that is the thing with ARPA regulations, to get things done and taken care of in the time frame we have left now, since we've done nothing since 2021. That is the reason for looking at this, to be able to keep the money and do the ARPA projects we want to do without having to forfeit the money back to the federal government. That is the true nature of this.
Okay, well, I think our words really do matter, and I think when we say that we're moving this so we can do whatever we want, that is a really big red flag, and I really urge you to come back with different language and some clarification to ensure that we're not going to spend it however we want, because I'm not satisfied, and actually I feel less confident than I did after watching the last ARPA meeting.
Well,
Thank you.
a comment on top of that is, we can't spend it anyway. The operations or county executive can't spend it however we want. The ARPA Commission has to make recommendations to the board, and as Tom has pointed out to me many times, the board has the final decision on how we spend the money.
Supervisor Hanson. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do I want to, can everyone hear me? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I echo a lot or some of what Supervisor Schellinger does that makes me uncomfortable. And as I've attended some of the ARPA meetings by Zoom, and one or two in person, what I really need to square, and maybe this will be better addressed at Thursday's meeting, is the language on page 11 when it says funds will be used for provision of general government services, and page 13 on the red block of government services to the extent of lost revenue. There are projects being presented to the board that I don't believe fit in that, and I really need to square that before we vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I kind of have a similar question to what Supervisor Hanson just asked or stated. During the ARPA meetings, I've noticed that there have been a couple nonprofits presenting, requesting funding. Would they still qualify under this?
That is up to the ARPA Commission, because right now, it was, the last I saw was there was 25% was internal spend for the county. There was 50% that was community projects designated by the county, and then there was 25% that was designated for external. So that was the initial recommendation by the ARPA Commission.
Okay, and then I guess my next question then is, if we do proceed with giving some of these nonprofits funding from the ARPA fund, how do we track where the money goes? Or is it just kind of out of our hands?
No, that would be done by a project, and that would be just like we did with the NIF, Neighborhood Improvement Fund, which they're going to talk about later, and we got the money from the state. They had to submit invoices and documentation to me, which I have gone through 3 of them for their initial draw, and then we have made one payment last week to Habitat. We made 2 payments this week to the Solution Recovery, and no, I can't think of it. Day by Day.
Okay.
So I am working on Oshkosh Kids and Covey this week yet. So no, they don't just get the money. They have to report back to us as a subrecipient. They sign subrecipient agreements about what they have to do with the money, and we do have to verify that and report that back to the state.
Okay, thank you very much.
Next is a neighborhood improvement fund grants update. We'll start first with the Winnebago County Help Program. Beth Roberts, Long-Term Support Division Manager.
Good evening. Please raise your hand or wave if you're not able to hear me through the mask. Want me to take it off? Okay, sure. I'm here to talk about the homelessness Eviction and Loss Prevention Program. I'm going to remind you what that program is about. It's called the HELP Program, and it is intended to look at consolidating and putting together a lot of the resources that are already available for people who are experiencing housing instability and really coordinating that. Secondly, it's about making sure that our community is well aware of those resources. So a lot of times people don't seek help until after they've been evicted or their home is foreclosed on. So it's to try and get awareness of those programs. Third, it is to provide direct assistance with people who might need help filling out an application, mailing something, turning something in, following up with what they need to because of whatever barrier they're experiencing. And then fourth, it's to provide follow-up at a 3-month, 6-month, and 12-month interval to make sure that they are still maintaining housing stability. So that's the intent of the program. We kicked it off officially on January 16th with a help supervisor and 3 help specialists. We have had, a total of 113 referrals, so that's quite a bit in a pretty short period of time. We are currently working with 62 of those people actively, and out of the people that we've provided housing for, 22 or 43% of the people that we've made sure that they maintain housing stability for have maintained that housing stability. And then the other half of the people that we're no longer working with are just stopped working with us. We weren't able to stay in contact with them. They may have found housing in a neighboring county, but they didn't engage with us beyond that. So about half of the people are still actively working with us. About half of the people who are not working with us anymore is because they found stable housing. So those are some of the statistics about who we're working with. Basically, out of all the referrals that we've received so far, about 20% of them were able to maintain housing stability. So again, that's our goal. And so we have 20% of these referrals that we were able to effectively work with. I'd like to give you a couple of examples of some anecdotal stories to give you a better idea of what we're doing. One example would be someone who was given an eviction notice because of too many police contacts, and that is a real thing. You can be evicted, and sometimes it's in the lease for causing a disturbance, basically. And this person came to us recognizing that they had nowhere else to go after the eviction, and claimed that there had been no police contacts. So the help specialist contacted the police department with that address, asked for all police contacts that occurred during the time of residence of that person, and the report was empty. There was no police contacts. So we printed it out, and that person took the printout to the landlord, who said, "My bad, I'm in error. You are not evicted." So just something as simple as that. Really looking at a lot of tenant rights things. There's another person who came to us very, very, very vulnerable for many reasons, and being homeless was putting that person at high risk. In order to get into stable housing, the person needed identification of some sort. There was no driver's license. They needed some type of identification. In order to get identification, you have to have a birth certificate. They're born in another state, and they had no income to access a birth certificate. So out of the funding that we've used so far, almost all of it's been used for the employees that are operating the program, but we did expend $46 so far in obtaining the person's birth certificate, having it sent to us so that that person could get an ID and then be eligible for the benefits that they're entitled to. So again, simple things. Some of the things that are surprising to us are the number of people in our community who are elderly that are experiencing housing instability and homelessness. That's been quite a surprise for us. A lot of people that we're working with are able to stay in their homes because we've been able to link them up with either the Aging and Disability Resource Center or other community partners to get support in the home to keep them stable there. So for example, people that maybe aren't able to fully care for themselves or for their property, and were feeling like they needed to leave that property and really didn't have many other options, were able to stay where they're at because of the appropriate supports being engaged for them that they didn't know that were out there. So those are just some anecdotal stories to give you an idea of how this is operationalized and how we're trying to maintain more housing stability in our community and prevent, to the extent we can, some homelessness. Questions from anybody?
No, you've done a good job.
Okay, well, this is where we're at so far, and we look forward to continuing.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Habitat for Humanity, Oshkosh, Tom. So I'm an executive director.
Sorry, just try to get this going here. Oh, wait. All right.
There's packets on your desk also.
I could just go over the packet then. We'll do a good old-fashioned speech. To any of you 40 or older, remember when we used to do it this way. My name is Tom Simon. I'm the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity of Oshkosh. And if nothing else, I wanted to thank the board. I was here when we had the meeting to approve the acceptance of this grant. I wanted to say there was a lot of confusion at that time. It was a very confusing competition to win the grant. I wanted to assure you that under this grant, Paul Kaiser has been your best friend. Paul Kaiser is making sure, no, we are not simply getting a check. We have to, in our submissions to Paul for reimbursement, give a receipt for every penny. And I will tell you, as I give my contact information, since I can't put it, or it's in the packet, that all of us, and it's a great group of executive directors with the 5 nonprofits, are committed professionals. We want to win grants like this in the future. So we have a great interest in making this work for Winnebago County. Having said that, I'll just kind of be flipping through my packet as I go. Oh, it is good? Well, we're doing really well this way. No, just, which one? Many of you know of Habitat for Humanity International. It's one of the world's largest charitable organizations for building housing. What's really why Habitat is often so liked is because we believe nothing is given, it's earned. We believe in a hand up, not a handout. We don't build houses for people, we build them with people. And the one thing is that we do is the homeowners must buy the house from us. It is not given. And what they do is they pay a 0% interest loan. It's a small payment, but they must pay it. And it's paid forward to go to all the future builds. Habitat for Humanity of Oshkosh has been here since April of 1989. It's actually one of the oldest Habitat affiliates in Wisconsin. People from Oshkosh went out and formed Habitat affiliates across the region. I used to work for Fox Cities Habitat for Humanity, one of the greatest in the habitat world. They were founded by people from Habitat Oshkosh. Did not know that. I worked for Habitat for Fox Cities up there in Neenah, Menasha. At the first meeting, some of you asked, why is not part of this grant being spent up in that region? That is Fox Cities Habitat. They just weren't part of this grant. Great organization, you'll see them in the future. And I wanted to say, too, there's been tremendous growth over the last 3-4 years. I'm proud I've been here during that time. And we expanded our territory. People asked why had so much been done by Habitat Oshkosh only in Oshkosh, because originally we had been limited to only Oshkosh. Immediately before the grant competition, we got permission from Habitat International to expand to the western part of Winnebago County. So we did, and that came just as the grant was coming. The program that we do has 3 main facets. There's the classic Habitat home builds. There's 40 of them in the Oshkosh area. I'm proud to say that 200 and some people will sleep in homes their families own tonight because they worked with Habitat. We also have a very popular program, Rock the Block. You're going to see this going on across Winnebago County. It's been very popular in Oshkosh. We send 80 to 100 some volunteers into a neighborhood, fix and maintain many houses in that area. It makes a tremendous difference in the neighborhood, the look, the feel, the community sense of the neighborhood. For the first time, we'll be doing this in Omro in 2024 as we expand our program. We also run the Habitat Restore. It is something, too, that we'll be expanding over the region. It's been very popular. It's on the frontage road, Kohler, and it has sold over $5 million of what would have gone to landfills over the last 13 years. Proud to say we just paid off the mortgage on that. All profits from that store are going to the program. So the grant, $10.3 million. There was a lot of confusion. What is it going to? What is it doing? What it was is we won this grant for a couple reasons. One, a county employee who should be really praised is Lindsay Erickson. John Damo had an idea. The 5 nonprofits wanted to put it together. The competition was innovations in workforce development housing. Now, obviously, Habitat, we were kind of the end of the continuum. You'll hear from Julie, who will talk to you about a middle part. You'll hear about Pam talking about where situations where families have an exceptional needs child. These are all barriers to developing workforce. To tell you the truth, I talk to many employers in this area. One of the biggest is you can put up whatever wage you want, but if there isn't affordable housing, nobody will take the job. So we put it together, but the brilliant writer was Lindsay. Our grant writing was 100 and some pages. I read it every day to make sure that we are complying with this grant application. She did a brilliant job. And there should be a motion in a future meeting to congratulate her for what she did. Hundreds of people will get housing solutions because you had a great county employee. What we did then, we were supposed to build 2 houses immediately. We have been working with the city of Oshkosh on a bigger development. My feeling as a Habitat executive director is the only way to solve a building shortage is build more housing. So we were working on a larger project in Oshkosh. We were also going to be talking about another project that's going to be occurring in Omro, but it is a sample of what we will be doing in the future, just under this grant. The first was very simple, a Habitat build, 1602 Bowen Street. This is the Hashim family. They are refugees from Iraq. They fled during the U.S. occupation. They were told, get out of their neighborhood, they're coming after you. They are now American citizens. They're both working in this community. That is workforce development. 421 Monroe Street, Pania Vang. She's a single mom. She was born in a refugee camp in Southeast Asia. She came to the United States. She has worked her way up. She now owns a home. You see her 3 daughters, workforce development. Grove Street, now we're ramping it up a little bit. We have been talking to the city of Oshkosh. Grove Street is the former, I believe, I'm not of the community long term, I believe that was Mercy Hospital some time back. Very hard property to develop. When the building was taken down, it was unclear what was under the ground yet. So we were working with the city of Oshkosh. Would they help us on a land development agreement so that we could buy that property and take the risk? The thing is, we needed funding to do the above ground part of it. That's where this grant comes in. This is what we presented to the planning department right before the grant competition was announced. Part of the grant competition was, did you have shovel-ready projects ready for approval? We were getting approval when the grant competition was announced. What you're going to see is 6 homes on Grove Street. This is the largest project we've ever done in Oshkosh. What you'll be adding is 10 to 12 adults to this neighborhood. We'll be adding 20-some children. We'll be adding tremendous diversity to this neighborhood. This is the Davis family. Their home was in that previous picture. It will be done in the next 90 days. This is 636 Grove Street, right next door. This family, the Hassin family, they fled the Syrian civil war. They came to this country with absolutely nothing. Abdel is a brilliant vocational guy. He's a skilled craftsman. Our guys love building with him. When he learns English, any company would want to hire him. This is what the rest of the street will look like. Within 90 days of the completion of the 2 homes that are ongoing, they'll be completed in approximately 2 to 3 months. the next 3 homes will go. What I needed with this grant and why we won it is what you are doing is every time we add another house to our production schedule, I have to add $200 and some thousand to my budget. We were stuck with situations to expand production. We had to have a ton of money to buy land going forward, but we needed money to build the homes that we have right now. That's what this grant did. It freed up the money for the homes we build so we could go to the future to bigger things. I know there's going to be a lot of questions when I talk about this, but remember, we haven't developed this part of this. So just listen to me and don't ask me for all the details because we're working on this. This is Omro. We've been talking to many people around the county. We were looking for a parcel of land. If you saw when we started this in my presentation, we started with 1 to 2 homes at a time. We then moved to 6. We're now going for 20. This is the Omro Springview Acres subdivision. I have to work with Paul. I need this next reimbursement by March 23rd. We will be closing on this land on March 27th. Why will we be doing this? Omro needs workers. There is not enough affordable housing in Omro. If we build these simple, decent homes there, and we have been working with the city to get their buy-in, we will be doing a Rock the Block program in Omro to get their buy-in. Think what could be built here. The grant is only providing the money to help us purchase the land and start the land development. Why aren't a lot of homes being built in Omro? It is terribly difficult to do the development. When you do a development all in, over time, $4.2 million will be spent to develop that. The grant that we are getting is 2.4. Only about $680,000 of the grant will be going to this development. But we're working with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We are working with private foundations. We are working with normal bank loans. We have put together a stream of revenue coming from about 5 different funding sources that there is no great risk to any one lender, and we can build over time. As I said, get used to different. What we have to do going forward is if we are the county that can figure out how to get housing built that's affordable, simple, decent housing, we can win this. Think what could happen. I talked to the Ahern family, the Barron family, the Van Handel family, descendants. I don't know if those names mean anything to you. There was the Ahern Ranch. There was the Barron Ranch that was done all over Fond du Lac, the Van Handel A-frame. They were building between 1949 and 1964 to build simple, decent homes for returning GIs. Many of you had questions about the grant. Isn't it really the same, what we are trying to do? What you will see in the future is our affiliate will be doing more and more of this type of housing subdivision. Why will I be doing this? Because those people working on the programs that will follow me speaking up are going to have people move through those programs that will need housing. And they will become the workers that will help keep this county great. That's my contact information. Trust me, and I think Paul can, I'm very good at detailed reports and my reimbursements, and we're happy to talk about all this. But why we wanted to be part of this grant is the Neighborhood Investment Fund is continued in the next governor's budget. So are other funding sources. We're going to do this, and we're going to build a lot of housing. So sorry, that's my report. Any questions?
Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Simon. I was looking at the page, the 5th page from the end, the Grove Street homes to begin summer of 2023. And
Yes.
looking at it with the garage at the end of a very long, needs to be shoveled driveway why did you make them detached, or why not put them closer to the house? Because it also cuts into children's backyard playing. I lived in a house in Houghton, Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula. Narrow in the front, long yard, and a lot of snow to move. Why did you build it that way, plan it that way?
There are setback requirements for each of the lots. One of the problems of development on Grove Street is the narrowness of the lots. It's actually one of the reasons the property had not been developed. We wanted to make sure that the homeowners have garages, and it also fits the character of the neighborhood. If I showed you the picture of across the street, most of the homes look exactly like the homes that we are building. In fact, one of our goals of the Habitat building program is you won't be able to tell which ones are the Habitat homes. So I guess in response to your question, it's because of the conditions of the lot that we're building on. We're trying to get 6 homes in there, and what the neighborhood looks like. There's always going to be some problem with some housing you build. Putting on the attached garage, we couldn't build as many homes on that strip.
So even if it weren't attached, if it were just closer to the back door, instead of that, I mean, I'm just thinking back to the days when we were shoveling a long driveway, and that looks like a lot of shoveling.
Again, that is a preliminary elevation that was done by the architect. If you looked at, you're welcome to go by Grove Street. 2 of the homes are going up.
Okay.
I think you would feel a lot better about it. The garages do not look like they're that far back on the actual homes that are being built.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Vice Chairman Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me say, this is a very, in my opinion, noteworthy presentation. You are accomplishing a need in this county, and I certainly would be the one, as I assume many of us here, appreciate your work and what you're doing. My question is, I assume these homes are about 1,200 square feet?
Yes, that is correct.
Which was the standard home when I was a young guy. Everybody had pretty much a 1,200, 1,400 square foot. So plenty adequate, I would think. Once again, thank you.
Yes, if I could, they're simple, decent homes. I'm going to be meeting with 3 more families that are going to be building 24 and beyond. We tell them this is your first home, not necessarily your last home.
Mm-hmm.
And we find that we do a lot with basements. You know, the great thing about the Midwest is you have a room in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
But we're trying to teach people that you get into the home. The problem is right now is that a lot of the builders, because of situations, we don't pay labor costs as Habitat. So builders are having to build bigger homes to make it cost justifiable. Problem is, we get a few big homes, then nobody can afford to have a home.
Very well said, sir. Very well said. Thank you.
Supervisor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Omro subdivision, does that have sewer and water right now?
That would be part of our development costs. We're going to have to do it. It's one of the reasons that Omro is having struggling to get new, simple, smaller homes, is because of the cost of development. I'm working with the United States Department of Agriculture. They'll help fund some of that. And I'll also be using the grant to cover the land and some of the initial land development costs.
Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A very good presentation. I can't agree with what you said totally, Mr. Simon. My question is, how can we help you as a board and individually advance what you want to do? Because I think this plan you have in Omro in 2024 and you have plans about doing the more areas is much, much needed. You know, I would hope that when the legislative committee meets, I would hope they bring up, you said the governor has put the neighborhood initiative back in the budget. I would hope that someone at that meeting speaks to the legislature about making sure that it is. I think, you tell me, contact us and this board, how we can help you advance, because this is a great project, and what your goal is, again, affordable housing, not just in Omro, other places, that more and more needed. I remember, Mr. Chairman, an article a couple years ago in July where a person was working at Generic, I think, South Town, a very good paying job. He was living out of his car. He couldn't find housing. These are the type of people we need to help some way, somehow. And like I say, let us know how we can help you. Thank you for a great presentation.
If I could, just to finish, because you basically have set up the next speaker who will be following me. What we need to do is we have to see housing as an issue that we have people sleeping on the street, we have people sleeping in their cars. How do we get them to a spot in between? Then how do we get them to housing? I would say for this board, you did a great thing. You did not have this information. You didn't know what was going on, but you approved this grant. Our purpose tonight is to show you that you have a team of professionals that is making this money well spent. And this will be returns to the county for years to come. And I would say to you, when we come forward in the future, or if you hear of a grant application like that, do ask us hard questions. But when we show that we've done the data, when we show we've put it together, support us. We have to do our homework. These will be competitive grants, but I promise you, we will deliver. And I think the others that will follow me will show that.
Supervisor Plom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation, Director Simon. According to the Oshkosh Chamber, our unemployment rate in the Fox Valley area is about 1.9%, and we still have a labor shortage. And the primary reason is because there's nowhere to live.
That is correct.
And so I'm very impressed by what you've laid out here, particularly the development in Amro. I don't feel like, in terms of economic development, we do enough west of I-41. So I'm very pleased to see that, and keep us updated. Thank you.
Yes, my last request is we were talking to additional landowners. If you are aware of a landowner that would be willing to talk to us. I think that this is the future. I think that a lot of people want to support small, efficient, small, affordable homes. The problem is we've been talking to a lot of developers. Sometimes we put so many barriers in the way, and often the costs just go through the roof. They can't do it. We are filling a void that is there.
Thank you.
Supervisor Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You and I met several years ago in Menasha when you were with Fox Cities Humanity, Habitat for Humanity. And one of the things you had started doing there, Habitat, was to purchase older, dilapidated homes and fix them up, and then give them to, or have families live in them. I'm not sure if that sort of thing fits into this grant, but is it something that you hope to do here in Oshkosh and in Winnebago County?
That's an excellent question. I think you have to adapt the housing to the conditions of where you are. What's the most efficient way to build housing? One of the things is Fox Cities, they have built up a nationally known up there. They have more capabilities. When you take an older home, there are a lot of costs. One of the problems in Oshkosh is we have a great number of old historical homes with asbestos, lead, many things. If the county was looking at anything, trying to lower those costs. They are a real barrier for people who are trying to buy these homes and try to do something with it. In our Rock the Block program, we find many of these homes, but the lead paint is everywhere. And the cost of removing lead paint is prohibitively expensive. So right now in the Oshkosh area, not until we get more of the program going. But it is a question for Oshkosh's future. Do we save the history or do we tear it down? And I'm afraid the longer we wait, the answer will be tear it down.
Well, thank you for considering it, and I look forward to what could happen with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next is Oshkosh Kids Foundation, Julie Dumke, co-founder and executive director.
Good evening. This is past my bedtime, so I'm going to do the best I can here, all right? Julie Dumke, director, executive director, and co-founder of the Oshkosh Kids Foundation. Oh, I hope I pushed the wrong one. There we go. Our mission is we work with children and their families that are in critical need. We provide anything a child needs to get to school, whether it be alarm clock, clothes, food, clothing, whatever a child gets to school. When we started in 2019, it became very apparent that we had many, many children that did not have homes. And this was why we started our foundation and why the Tiny Home Project. if you look at these numbers behind me, on our north side, 55 to 74% of our kids are living in poverty. The bottom right statistic is the one that is always very frightening, and that Oshkosh has been 7 years in the running, the fastest growing city of extreme poverty. So what that means is in Oshkosh, instead of 42% poverty, most cities have 30% of it is reduced and a small percent of it's free. Oshkosh is just the opposite. Most of our families are living in extreme poverty. This is our data showing the trend in homeless children in Oshkosh, and you can see about 2007, 2008, it started to spike. Since that time, we've averaged between 175 and 225 homeless children, and those are just that have been identified. Oshkosh Kids had been providing since 2019 hotel stays to try to help until families could get into hotels or into either a Habitat house or a situation where they could get into an apartment. And with the onset of COVID and the moratorium on evictions, that number went through the roof of the number of people we were helping. Last year, when things had actually slowed down, our bill was like $55,000 for motels. And really, that's not doing much. We're housing a family, but it's a temporary fix, not really making a difference long term. So we started looking at a way that we could have a sustainable way to help these families and actually break the cycle of poverty. And we came up with Tiny House Village. And we want to thank this board for approving this because it was very instrumental in helping us move forward on this project. The grant was passed approved in March. The city did final approval in the end of June, and we broke ground in July. If you drive by, you're going to see our first phase of the tiny homes is already done. We have 3 families that have moved in the month of January. In February, and we have a regular lineup of families coming. Our location is on Packer Ave between Main and Jackson. If you go to the old Primo's building and if you looked out the door and you went down Packer Ave, we're on the right. It was an empty lot. And we're conveniently located to schools, the food pantry, St. Vincent de Paul, and the bus line. Here's a different rendition of our site. This is a pretty good model. A few additions to this model. We have, the property will be fenced to keep our families secure. A lot of our families come from domestic abuse situation. We also have lots of security cameras to keep everyone safe. Verve Credit Union had donated a piece of land to do our water retention pond. And we have 2 facility storage shelters for our facility on each corner. Here is the building in process, and one of the questions, Wes, we do have heated sidewalks and parking lots. We will be solar powered. Panels will be going up. Our primary funder, this was one of the reasons he was interested in funding us, and this is for long-range sustainability. We're trying to keep our overhead costs as low as possible, and with 65% occupancy, this project will break even and will be self-sustaining. Here's a model of our home. They're 2-bedroom, full kitchen, full bath. We can have up to 4 people in our home. And each one has a little storage shed, because part of this is teaching families how to be good renters and good neighbors by picking up their yard, putting our bikes away, our toys away, and it's also extra storage. This is actual pictures from one of the insides of our homes. They're fully furnished. We're partnering with Jake's Network of Hope to do the furnishings, and families, when they leave us, will take like the towels and kitchenware, bedding, that kind of thing, and the furniture will stay and be turned over for the next family. Families can stay with us up to 18 months. It's transitional housing until they move in to a Habitat house or into the rental market. During this time, they work with our full-time community service. We have a case manager who is hired through Advocap. She started in December, and the families work on, part of their lease is they have to work on services. Whatever got them to homelessness, they have to work on services. Our goal is for them to have a full-time living wage job by the time they leave, and a vehicle and for their own transportation. This is the community center that this grant, the neighborhood grant, funded. We have in there a full commercial kitchen to teach cooking classes and healthy living classes. We also will have financial literacy classes, employability classes, things for the kids, enrichment activities. A family can check out the place for a visit. We have a classroom, 3 offices, a bed bug room, a laundry facility, and a work area for families to apply for jobs and do trainings. And that's all in the community center that this fund provided. This was completed in December, and our new our new case manager moved in shortly after. Here's some of our partners in our project. We've had a lot of in-kind donations. Throughout the community that's helped bring our costs down, and we're very, very grateful for the support that we've received. This was a $3.5 million project when we started, and due to COVID, it's now $5 million, and we are proud to say we are $425,000 from fully funding this project. And we thank you for the $500,000 that helped us get along that path. With this project, we will take 1/3 of the Oshkosh homeless children and have them have a home, a place that they can call home, and the parents, the services and support that they need, that they can become self-sustaining, contributing members to our society. So that's our little brief, very quick overview. If you have questions, please reach out. We're at Oshkosh Kids Foundation, gmail.com. That's me. And I will be happy to answer any questions. I'm horrible at my phone because it rings all day from our residents, and I do much better with email. So does anyone have any questions?
I think they've all been watching that grow out there, so yes, we do have one.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. If you haven't driven by, I suggest you do. The second part will start in April, and the entire project should be done by the end of June.
Supervisor Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I just found it. OshkoshKids.org. I wanted your email address. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, we thank you very much for everything you're doing. And last but surely not least, the convoy, the Pam Schultz, Chief Executive Officer.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Pam Schultz. I'm with Covey. We too are extremely grateful for the approval of this grant and what we'll do for the people we serve. People we serve are people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. And obviously, that's a very vulnerable group who has extreme difficulty finding affordable and safe housing. Which button do I push? Oh, there we go. So just a little history on Covey. We've been around for almost 70 years. We were founded in 1954. We've always been an innovator of services for people with disabilities. We actually were formed at a gentleman's dining room table. His friend was talking to him about the difficulty he was having finding services for his son with cerebral palsy. And the idea of Covey was born. We've offered services to physicians. We've offered some of the first daycare focused on children with disability. We've helped the schools understand how to serve people with disabilities. We created a very unique respite program back in the 90s, which allows families to work and provide care for their other family members. Because we can take care of their loved ones with the disabilities. Throughout all the years that we've been around, we've always been known for our high quality and innovative services. In 2017, we rebranded and became Covey. And we just look at how Covey can shape the future, not only for people with disabilities, but for the people in the communities that they live in. Throughout our history, we've served thousands of people. Whoops, went the wrong way, sorry. I wanted to tell you a little bit about our name because it really describes who we are. Covey is a small group of birds that stays together throughout their lives for protection and comfort. As a group, they're stronger and safer, and they're able to do things they couldn't do alone. And we really believe in that concept at Covey. We work with the community, we work with the participants, we work with their families and with the staff to make sure everyone is supported and has what they need. We chose a feather to represent ourselves because it's very rare and no two feathers are alike. Every feather has a unique pattern and it can't be duplicated, just like every person has a unique pattern and can't be duplicated. Feathers provide warmth and protection. One isn't enough, but together the bird can weather the storm. Feathers create possibilities. They empower birds to fly high and explore greater opportunities. So our feathers represent protection, individuality, and opportunity. Our vision is a world that embraces individuals with disabilities for who they are, and our mission is to create opportunities that foster personal growth. The adult family homes that we're creating with the funds from this grant is one of the ways that we are going to create opportunities for growth. Currently, we have community-based programs such as Covey Connects, Covey community-based adult day services, I Can Bike, which is a program that helps children with disabilities learn how to ride a regular bike, Meaningful Meals that partners with the restaurants in Oshkosh to help restaurants understand better the needs of our participants and to help our participants understand how to better access community services. We have respite
Excuse me,
care,
if you could
which-
talk into your mic, they couldn't hear you in the back, sorry.
We have respite care, which I mentioned earlier, provides families with a break from caregiving so that they can be employed or take care of other family needs. And soon, as a result of this grant, we will have adult family homes. The adult family homes that are being funded with this Neighborhood Investment Fund grant are really critical to Winnebago County. Many adult family homes and service providers throughout the county have closed recently as a result of the challenges presented by COVID and as a result of the challenges presented by the labor market. A lot of people have asked us if we're a little crazy going into this right now, but we do have a great deal of experience providing services, and we've been successful in hiring and keeping staff, which is really critical to this program. Our first step in the grant, the first monies we spent were to buy a property at 250 West 9th Avenue. And you can see some before pictures. It was in pretty bad shape, needed a lot of remodeling and updating. We've completed that. We've updated the home. It's a home that you or I would be proud to live in. We finished the remodeling in December. We submitted our licensing application. These homes are licensed by the Department of Health Services in the state of Wisconsin. We submitted our licensing application. They've requested a little bit of additional information, but we feel like that process is going to go pretty smoothly. We already have a number of staff hired, and we're beginning to train for this property. On this property, the grant funded resolving a mold issue. We gutted and remodeled the kitchen and the bathrooms. We moved the laundry room to the main floor so that our participants can be more independent and take care of their own needs. We replaced some exterior doors. We've installed an entirely new HVAC system. The system that was there was pretty antiquated. I think it was original to the house, which was built in the 50s. We resolved some water issues in the basement, reinforced the basement walls, did electrical work, replacing outlets and light switches, replaced all the lights, completed some landscaping cleanup, replaced all the flooring, and we painted the interior throughout. The second home that we're planning to build with the funds is going to be on Woodhaven Lane in Neenah. This is the future site of a fully accessible home that we're partnering with Fox Valley Technical College construction program to build. And one of the things that we're really excited about with that is we're helping to train a new generation of construction workers, skilled construction workers, which, if any of you are familiar with the construction industry right now, there's a serious lack of qualified employees. We're also very excited about the fact that they'll learn what it takes to build a fully accessible home, because as our population continues to age, full accessibility is going to be extremely important. So with Fox Valley Tech, we've got the construction plans, a drawing. This is what the exterior of the building will look like. This is the floor plan. The home will serve 4 individuals. Each of those individuals will have their own room. We will have staff there 24/7 to help support those individuals. Some of the homes we build will focus on increasing people's skill set so they can move into a more independent setting. We have been talking with Tom a lot about how we can partner to better serve homeowners with disabilities, and so that is something that we're looking at. This grant has been really instrumental in bringing some of the nonprofits together to share resources and ideas. So our next steps with the grant is to break ground for the house in Neenah. That will happen in May of this year. Determine a location for a third house. We've been talking about possibly in the Habitat Amro neighborhood. However, we're not sure if that's going to be happening. We're hoping to finalize the location of the third house in the second quarter of this year. We're in the process of getting bids from builders. We're going to use the same floor plan that we have for the Fox Valley Tech home for our other fully accessible home. And once we select a builder, we will begin construction on that third home. Like I said, these homes will be licensed by the state. We have submitted our licensing application. Our target is to open the home on 9th Avenue in May. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to achieve that. That's really 100% in the state of Wisconsin's hands in terms of when they come to inspect the home. So that's where we're at. Any questions I can answer for you?
Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. First, I want to thank Colby because they are a very good partner whenever we done our Winnebago wheelchair wash every year. I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
The second thing I wanted to ask is all the work done at 250 9th Street, because that's in my district, and maybe I can get one of my supervisors to kind of just look at it, because I'd be interested in that.
I would love to invite anybody who wants to come tour to reach out to me. You can find our information at covey.org. My phone number is 292-1125. I've already talked with one of the gentlemen here, and I'm going to be reaching out to him to arrange a tour of some of our programs. I would love to.
And I'm very glad, Mr. Chairman, I made a statement yesterday at the Human Services meeting when the Oshkosh Kids Project was made, that I think that this county doesn't have to be the driver about how to solve the homelessness issue, but I think we should be part of a facilitator to help getting all these different nonprofits, whether it's Coley or Habitat for Humanity or AVCAP. I think, how do we address the needs? And, we're all thankful what we did with day by day warming shelter in December, but what do we do in the future? And I think we need to address the concerns, not just in Oshkosh, but I'm very concerned about what, there's homelessness and other things like that in the Amro and the Winnebago and the Neiman Nash area. So I'm very hopefully, and I encourage Mr. Topol, Bill Topol, the director, do our staff get involved? I don't think we have to be the drivers of it, but I think we should be part of the facilities of solving these issues, of housing that's affordable. Another big issue on my plate, people know, is about senior housing, affordable, which I think is another big issue. So I'm glad I'm hearing that you and Habitat for Humanity and others are collaborating there, and I hope the county helps you do more of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other lights on, so I thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this time, I am open for adjournment. Second. Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Adjourned.